We'll start out with drawings with Jim's design. Just to kind of set the agenda here for this evening, essentially we're going to go through their presentation when SK Design and Sama at that point, when those questions are answered, we'll open it up to other town official questions. After that, I will go to a public question and answer session. We do have people coming in on Zoom. So I'm going to do 5 questions from Zoom participants, then 5 questions from people on the floor. I'd like to limit the time to 3 minutes per person. Obviously, if you're going, I will be person because I want to make sure anybody that wants to speak gets an opportunity to speak. Okay, so open it up with Jim Scalise from SK Designs to start. Okay, if I keep my mask.
So good evening. For your record, my name is Jim. Part of the conservation process, and they had us change this water on our site plan. So, 2 things: one, that we changed the stormwater, and 2, that we amended. Those 2 pieces are included. Drawings will reflect that. As the drawing located at what's, I guess, Abbey Road is actually East Hubbard Road. The project location is on Lot 8. From a survey endorsed back in January. Of use requirements, the town allows what's called a commercial greenhouse. That section. The proposal is a greenhouse building with a maximum. The owner of the property, what I put on the form this morning, is Abbey Road Land LLC. All the abutters within 300 feet of the property have been notified. The town is part of that process. And the entire town of Sandisfield really has what's called a base zoning district. So there aren't different rules for different sections of town, other than if you're right along a river, you might be in a floodplain. There is an overlay district for floodplain. We're not in that overlay district, so that doesn't apply to this project. The proposed development, could you go to slide 2, please? Just to back up, here's a picture of what the land looks like. This is Lot 8. The applicant also owns Lot 6 and 7, which are 2 rectangular lots with frontage along Town Hill Road. This property, the edge of the property, if you can see this better, this edge of the property is all wetlands, and this is the state forest over here. Up and down on the sheet is Town Hill Road. The applicant owns lots 6 and 7, two rectangular lots, and also owns lot 8, which is subject to this application, which is 47.6 acres approximately. that okay? So just to cover that, what's in green is what's subject to the application. The applicant also owns these two lots. There's access to this property along East Hubbard Road, also known as Abbey Road. I haven't done an in-person presentation in about a year, I guess, here, so this is a little different. Here's a next drawing, which is drawing 3 of 9. This drawing shows a footprint of the proposed facility as it sits on the overall parcel. So if you're looking at drawing 3 on your smaller set, you'll see a green area. The darker green areas are bordering vegetated wetland. We had a wetland scientist go out, delineate by soils and vegetation where wetlands are. That's a darker green color. There's also a finger-like wetland along the road. Our project's, 375 feet away from this wetland. Jurisdiction around wetlands is 100 feet. So the project is along the buffer zone in this section. And then the changes that were made are related to stormwater. And I've pulled all the stormwater away from the wetlands and redirected it to the upland so that there's no impacts. And the state representative and I had a collaborative, probably should. Yeah, I switched to 4. Thank you. So this picture that you see is the site plan. Just to kind of continue, this project is the proposal. These gray rectangles represent a 4,500 square foot greenhouse. A greenhouse is it's got a small gable ridge structure to it. It has a membrane covering that's translucent that allows light through, but you can't see through it. So a typical greenhouse type structure, 4,500 square feet, 150 feet long, roughly 30 feet wide. What's in brown, the rectangle in the tan color, is the proposed 5,000 square foot building. In a building, say, similar to this one, there's some offices, there's a restroom, there's a container like you see on a ship, although a little smaller probably, about 10 feet wide, about 25, 30 feet long. And that's inside that container. It's a prefabricated unit that comes from a factory. And that's where the conversion activity, I know there's some correspondence that I received today about concerns about how that happens. And it's a prefabricated laboratory. It meets all the standards. It comes from a manufacturer that follows all the rules, which makes it simple for us to buy that and kind of open the garage door, install it and use it without having to make sure with the local building inspector and for us to be practicing on building is kind of an elaborate laboratory. This is something that you can buy pre-manufactured to make sure that it works. So this project will require a drinking water well. It'll require a septic system. There's a bunch of kind of requirements that I'll run through and kind of walk through the zoning. Under the zoning bylaw, it allows, the first thing is use. So if I was sitting in the audience, I might say, how does a commercial greenhouse fit with a cannabis growing facility? Does that really fit? Well, the fact is that it's really up to the special permit granting authority, which in this case is the select board, to decide. If you look at your table of use requirements, it has commercial industrial uses in bold, and then you go down a few items, it says commercial greenhouse. So this use is what we think we have. But if you go down a few more lines in that table at the very bottom, it says other. And under other, it says that if there's a use that's similar to uses that are listed, it's really up to the special permit granting authority to decide whether or not this use fits or not. So we're kind of fitting, we think, under commercial greenhouse, but ultimately understand a special permit, this application that we're asking for, they're special. And the local permit granting authority has latitude really to decide on how it's applied and how this applicant is viewed as it relates to the zoning. It's really a local process, and that's what we're working on. So I'm going to kind of try to run through what I think are criteria that are necessary for this board to make a decision under the zoning based on the rules in your zoning. And your zoning is very typical to all the towns I've worked in, honestly, not just in Massachusetts, but in many other states that have a pretty standard zoning bylaw or ordinance, depending if it's a city or town, and that lays out what the criteria are. So there's a few specific requirements that are included. One is off-street parking. Your zoning has a paragraph about off-street parking with some requirements. So one is sufficient size. The zoning requires that to be sufficient size and sufficient number of spaces, but doesn't tell you how to get there. There isn't a table, there isn't a chart of that. So what engineers do in those cases is we refer to documents and methods that we have to determine such things. In this case, I went to the Institute of Transportation Engineers. They're a national publisher of engineering studies across the country that they do for traffic and for parking. And they have a parking generation manual that I refer to. I considered this a light industrial use, which I found under other engineering guidance to be applicable to this type of use. I found at least 5 other applications online that have for marijuana growing facilities that had referred to them from a parking perspective as general light industrial. So I consider that standard engineering practice. If you go through that, it's based on the number of employees. So if this facility has 10 employees, they would expect that you would need 7 parking spaces. But also, rather than overbuild parking, which is considered under good land planning a terrible idea. So I have 7 spaces, which is the absolute minimum at the 5,000 square foot building. So out front of this, there'd be 7 parking spaces. But in and around the greenhouses inside the fence, if there was workers, I would expect most of the workers would be at the greenhouses. If there's work trucks or that sort of thing, there's plenty of space as there's a 25-foot drive aisle around all the greenhouses. So if, for example, I'm off by a space or 2, there's adequate space on site without building more parking for practice, which I try to not do. Sure. So, that's kind of the plan. This will be a gravel yard around the greenhouse structures, and that will that'll provide adequate parking. Additional is location. Parking can be located no closer than 100 feet to the road, so I carefully located my building and my row of parking 100 feet away from the property line. Stormwater. I have about as part of the application book, if you look at it, in the back of it, I have a CD. And the CD has about 250 pages, probably. I don't know exactly. It has several hundred pages of calculations as it relates to stormwater. So I did a detailed stormwater analysis. That's a requirement under a paragraph in your parking under zoning. And it's also a requirement as part of the Conservation Commission. Although now that I've moved it all away from the wetlands, it's less so as important for that group. But so there's detention basins, which are stormwater ponds. There's a bunch of underground piping. There's this blue is just a grass filter strip along the side. I'm sorry, I'm on sheet 5. And I've carefully collected all the stormwater off all the roofs into swales and drainage catchments between each greenhouse. So there's a complete control of stormwater on the site. There'll be no concentration or diversion of stormwater, which is against the building code, and also against the stormwater management standards. So there's a very detailed report and analysis. I won't bore you. I think I'm the only one that's interested in stormwater, but it is a requirement of your parking. Under section 7, which is the next section in your zoning, it talks about signs. So I have to mention it, but this applicant really has no desire to have any signs other than directional signs. Now, it's a requirement to have a 911 number posted for emergency vehicles, fire, or what have you. So we'll have that. We'll have a number. And then we're going to have just directional signs, one out on Town Hill Road, one at the driveway, just in case there's a delivery and he isn't stopping at a neighbor's house asking where to go. We'll have a couple of small directional signs. There's sizes of those signs that are included in your zoning bylaw, which we will absolutely meet. So there's no variance or waiver required. We'll meet the by right requirements for signs. Section 8, the next section in your bylaw, talks about driveways. And I apologize, but this, I know it's boring, but this is all stuff that's required as part of the permit application. Site distance, there's about 15 requirements for driveways. I think less than that actually apply. If you go to number 3, it's 100 feet of site distance in each direction. We clearly have several hundred feet in each direction. Not within 75 feet of any intersection. We're about 1,100 feet from the intersection. The grade going into the site has to be less than 12%. Ours is 8 to 10%. Abbey Road is not paved, and thus our apron and driveway does not need to be paved. A 15-foot drive is required. We propose a 24-foot drive. The driveway shall be crowned. That's just site grading. So our driveway will be crowned. The driveway has to have a culvert to control water. We have a 15-inch, just let me double check that. I'm not sure I label it there, but I'm pretty sure it's a 15-inch culvert, or 12 or 15-inch culvert that goes under the site driveway. Cuts and fills, I've designed the driveway so there's really minimal cuts and fills, maybe a couple of feet at worst, but very much matching grade. And the applicant will coordinate with town officials. So there's a requirement that we work with the DPW as it relates to driveway location and construction. You know, we have to have 8 inches of gravel, that sort of thing. Those are typically construction-related documents. I would expect that the town would be very much involved in the construction should this be approved. So that's normally a condition if a project like this goes forward. So we would expect there to be involvement going forward as it relates to construction, but those are easy details and standard details for us to look at. There's 2 topics now that are a little outside of my expertise. The first being odor, the second being security. So at this time, I'd like to pass the microphone to our security expert. Clint Wynn will speak about security and how that works at the project for a few minutes. And then after that, we'll have Steve McAfee talk about odor, and then they'll pass it back to me and we'll wrap this up for you.
Thanks, Jim. Hi, everybody. My name is Clint Wynn. I'm working with Sama on as a security consultant to them on this project. About 35 years of security experience as a consultant. I was a consultant to the state of Rhode Island when they legalized medical marijuana there, and was a big part of them getting that program off the ground in the state of Rhode Island. Since then, I've been working up here for 15 or so years in Massachusetts, putting together projects like this for similar companies. The security piece of this is not really that flexible, and there isn't really a lot to talk about because it's governed by the Massachusetts Cannabis Control Commission, the CCC. You've probably heard of that. And there are 2 pieces of that, 2 types of plans. So they require a security, what they call them both plans, one of which is a narrative that is essentially the policies and procedures of the way the place is run as it relates to the licensed agents that work in the facility, how the facility is run from a seed to sale auditing process. And the second plan is just an overlay of the security system on the site plan and within the buildings plans. Those have both been done, submitted to Chief Morrison of the police department here, and he has approved that and understands the way it would work. So there isn't much more or any detail that I can get into it. We're at this point, if anybody needed to look at that plan, we'd ask that you go through the chief. Because it isn't something that's going to be published clearly. It's a security system. It does involve video surveillance, access control, intrusion alarm, essentially keeping people off the property during off times and to be able to control certain areas of the property even as the employees move through certain areas of the property. So that's all I have for now, and I'll be hanging around if there are any questions. And at this time, I turn it over to Steve.
Can you mention dark sky and perimeter intrusion?
Sure. So the facility will have lighting within the fence area, all around the greenhouse. This is all the part of the fenced area here. The lighting will be an LED type lighting with a setup that is what we call dark sky, meaning that all the lighting will shoot down. So it won't be that city look as you look up towards the facility from the road or even from the distance. That lighting will be motion activated on the perimeter. Should anybody jump the fence, that's when the lights will come on. They're not on all the time. Clearly, you can't have lights on all the time when you're trying to grow things in the greenhouse because there's a grow cycle where you need a dark cycle to the product. So the motion detection activation will turn those lights on for a short period of time so that we can evaluate using the video system what's going on, and then they will shut back off if there's no further intrusion. The building itself will have an intrusion system in it that will have, you be armed and disarmed as people come and go through the facility. I'm not going to get into the fire alarm piece because that's not necessarily, it's going to be part of the electrical package, I think, but it will obviously have a full compliant fire alarm system as well. Okay. I'm going to take questions later after the board goes through it. Okay. So now I'd like to introduce Steve, who's going to talk about odor mitigation.
Thank you very much. Hope you all are doing very good this evening. I'm the only one with something on the television here, so hopefully y'all can see it. I'm with the company Pure. We are the manufacturers of a hydroxyl generation technology. Hydroxyls are a naturally occurring element in the atmosphere. Basically, they're water. Everybody knows water, it's H2O. Hydroxyls are HO. So just very simple chemistry of what we're doing. Next slide. So as I say, natural product, naturally occurring element in the atmosphere. And what it does is it actually reacts with everything around it. So HO or OH is a very unstable oxidant that is striving to become water again, right? It's looking to bind with another hydrogen that it may do in the atmosphere. But more often what happens is it reacts with organic VOCs that are present in the space, which is how we eliminate odors as well as other products in the area. So we actually do eliminate viruses, bacteria, mold, whole slew of pathogens. One of our units is actually registered with the FDA. We've proven our safety and efficacy through their processes, and everything is designed according to the limits that the FDA publishes. It does sanitize and purify both the air and surfaces. So, you know, when we're talking about these facilities, we're going to have a pair of units inside of each grow house. They're going to be positioned in opposite corners, blowing in opposite directions to generate a bit of a cyclonic action within the grow facility. And that'll give us more exposure time and honestly a higher degree of air processing within the space before anything is actually discharged out of the greenhouse. And, you know, apart from what we've done previously in the cannabis industry, we've actually been used in a large number of industrial applications, from rendering plants to automotive manufacturing, again, medical facilities. We're on a couple of COVID floors. It's in a lot of places effectively deployed, safely deployed. Next slide. So this is a little brief on how this actually works in nature. So in the upper atmosphere, when the sun is shining, the sun's spectrum of UV reacts with water vapor in the air and snips off that hydrogen, resulting in the formation of a hydroxyl. And again, those hydroxyls then kind of are looking to bind to something. In the upper atmosphere, they tend to actually react with methane, which according to NASA, they call it nature's detergent because it actually assists in the degradation of upper atmosphere ozone. So hydroxyls are actually kind of a check on the hole in the ozone layer from a natural perspective. We are basically mimicking a very specific wavelength. Sorry, next slide. A very specific wavelength of the sun's total spectrum. And that is actually what delineates us between a lot of the other similar technologies out there. We're producing a broad spectrum of UVC wavelength energy that gives us this very targeted reaction with water vapor in the air. And then as these oxidants flow into the space, they're basically degrading the VOCs that are generated from the odor source, in this case, the cannabis plants. And those are basically broken down into base components and, you know, just consumed within the natural environment. Next slide. The company itself has been around for 15 years, actually going on 16 now, based in Boynton Beach, Florida, which is just outside of Fort Lauderdale. About 6 years ago, they got their FDA approval for the device that they use in that respect. But we've been dealing with cannabis industry for, I want to say, 8 years now. And, you know, a number of different clients have used this successfully in their grow facilities. And I believe the next slide is, oh, did I skip one? There should have been a case study. Oh. Oh, sorry. But I did have a case study in there. Oh, there it is. For some reason, it's deleted slide 5. One up, yeah. There we go. So one of the facilities that we did, 200,000 square foot indoor facility, similar, again to this type of, engineered building, but significantly larger. Very, very high cannabis concentration, rack after rack after rack after rack. The products that were being used initially as specified by the local government were all kind of dosing agents that were introduced into the discharge or exhaust air from the facility, and they weren't working. This particular one was positioned in an industrial park outside of a residential neighborhood, and the odor mitigation technology that had been implemented from the initial startup wasn't working effectively. They brought us in, put in the units that you can see here. These are we call it an IDI, but it's a multi-optic unit. After installation of that, the sensors detected no presence of the types of odors that they were looking for, and there were no registered complaints from any of the local townspeople after we put the system in. Again, everything that we're doing is a naturally occurring process. It's basically biomimicry of what's happening outdoors on a sunny summer's day. When you're expecting to get a sunburn, that's basically what we're doing 24/7, and that's given us a good exposure to the good generation of the hydroxyls and good breakdown of all the byproducts that are in the space. So that's all I've got. I'm going to hand it back across.
So it's Jim again. Thank you, Steve, and thanks, Clint. Just a couple pages left here, and I'll get out of everyone's way. Lighting. We talked briefly about lighting. The perimeter lighting that's shown. This is drawing 7 of 9. There's perimeter lighting shown. It's all LED lighting. It's a cutoff fixture straight down. There's 2 kinds of fixtures. There's 3 other fixtures that are located at the parking lot. They shine a little more light. Basically, they'll be outside, shining towards the building to create a safe parking lot. Everything can be on a motion sensor. Typically, the parking lot lights are actually on a timer because employee hours are usually pretty regulated. If you need any other lighting, by sensor, typically you have some just downcast lighting that can be put on the building itself for if someone had to run in late at night or something for safety. All the lights are 15 feet high, so it's a relatively low light pole all the way around the facility. So this is a facility that will light the ground and will not light. There's no light spill. This is all based on manufacturer numbers. There's no light spill anywhere near a common property line other than maybe right along Abbey Road, right near the entrance. But other than that, there's no neighbors effectively anywhere near the property line here. Landscaping. There's minimal landscaping required. I've got several hundred feet of forest on 3 sides. Just along Abbey Road, there'll be clearing that'll be generally near the property line. I expect there'll be some natural trees, but typically when you clear an area like this, it looks, honestly, just the edge of the forest will look terrible. So what we're proposing is some street trees. Typically in this part of Massachusetts, there's a list of non-invasive street trees that are a part of any road construction. So, and they're typically, like I looked at 3 other subdivision standards in 3 other towns. Take Lee, for example, which has a pretty good one. They want a street tree of a certain size about every 40 feet. So we show trees all along the frontage of the property, all planted at the interval, consistent with if we were building a road. And that would, but that's really the only place where there's really an opportunity to provide any planting. Refuse is a typical Massachusetts site plan review. It's typically 2 seconds about a dumpster, which I show. But in this case, it's a little different. There's always a question about what happens with the waste material from the process. And in this case, any waste material from the actual cannabis growing is all composted on site. So there's no disposal. There's no throwing away of excess material. All that material is composted and reused for fertilizer. So it's all organic. It's a full organic process proposed for this facility. The only thing that goes into the dumpster would be normal trash, like this application in a few months, right? There's extra paper, you throw it in the dumpster, but nothing related to the actual cannabis growing or any byproduct of any of this material goes into the dumpster. Everything is recycled. Water and wastewater is a requirement. In this case, water and wastewater is private. It's similar in scope and size to a single family home. So you're going to have a drinking water well for domestic purposes. You have a drinking water well, which with just 10 employees, it actually has less usage than what you would have at your house. Those are the two, water and wastewater. And I know there's more. Under irrigation, the way that works is it's a drip irrigation system. And this technology was really invented for sewage disposal, honestly, where you can run these tubes that have very small perforations with an actuated valve based on pressure. And they just drip the water out. And that's a similar process we're using here for irrigation. So the beds, what the beds are is a like a fabric material wrapped around soil that's set on the ground. The ground will be gravel. So you'll have a greenhouse structure. You'll have a gravel floor. You'll set this burlap bag full of soil and you'll plant a plant in it. And you'll have these, several of these obviously in each greenhouse. But these beds are raised up, so they tend to dry out. So then they drape hoses over the tops of these that have these small perforations, and they're related. So you circulate water through the tube, and it just drips very small amount of water all the time on the plants, and that keeps them hydrated and allows them to grow. The reason that you go through all that is you use a ton less water. The reductions are all over the place. If you do the research, typically on average, these facilities use only a couple thousand gallons per day. I know at peak usage, when these greenhouses are really cooking on that hot August day, so the peak usage could be as high as 15,000 gallons. So there are days where you'll use more water, but it's based on the absorption rate by the plants and about the pressure in the hose. So it can be regulated and controlled. But so there is variation in water use. As far as permits and regulating water use like this, it's Massachusetts looks at facilities that use over 100,000 gallons a day. This facility will never come anywhere close to that threshold. Like I do ski areas locally where they do snowmaking and they're spraying tons of water to make snow. Those facilities have Water Management Act permits and are regulated. Uses like this don't come anywhere near that level of irrigation or water use. If you put that in perspective, a well that puts out 10, 11 gallons a minute over 1,440 minutes a day would satisfy this project on its busiest, on its most intense usage. So you're talking 10 gallons a minute. There's 5 criteria that the select board in this case have to go through. Special permit granting authority has findings that they need to make. So I typically try to go through those to help assist the board in at least understanding what I meant by the application booklets and all the materials I created. The first one is the use in harmony? And this is always debatable. It's difficult, honestly, in this town in that you don't have specific zones. I think the fact that the use is allowed under the zoning by special permit is telling. That commercial greenhouses are considered an activity that is acceptable under your zoning bylaw. So that's usually where we start. How does it fit? I mean, the zoning also has an applicability section that talks about uses should be in harmony, should be, I think that might be number 2. Is it essential and desirable, to the community? And I think in this case, this particular use were it on Main Street would not be essential. And I think it's about location. So what I've gone into in my application is talking about that this is generally a remote location. You don't have a lot of traffic on Abbey Road. You're not going to drive by this and see it. It's 1,000 feet from Town Hill Road, and it's surrounded by forest. It's up against the state forest, and it's a greenhouse, generally a greenhouse use, but will be cut into the hillside. So if there's any potential for noise, it'll be blocked by the natural grade. There's about a 15 or 20 foot cut in this back section. So we're cutting the ground down and terracing these through what I call greenhouse area 1, 2, and 3. So each of these are on their own little plateau to kind of step with the earth to minimize site work and balance the earthwork. But that's generally our feeling. As far as essential and desirable, it's adequately screened and remotely located to not be objectionable. It creates jobs. So 10 jobs potentially is a few $100,000 a year in annual payroll, and it creates taxes. And on top of that, this particular use has a host community agreement. I think all of those are very standard and typical when you're weighing is it essential and desirable. Not detrimental to adjacent uses. So we have a large 46 acre parcel where this facility is located. And if you kind of put that in scale a little bit, I think it shows that the site is adequately buffered by natural forest and as it relates to the neighborhood. The nearest house is up here on Town Hill Road. It's about 1,150 feet from the corner of the greenhouse to that house. That's a pretty good setback. A mile's 5,280 feet. We're at 1,100 feet, so you can do the math. But we're located a fair distance. Our limit of clearing here is 925 feet from Town Hill Road, so there'll be no visibility of any kind. I'm told by experts that we don't have an odor issue. We've got a careful lighting plan, and we're set as it relates to noise into the earth, which creates a natural barrier, a physical barrier for noise transmission. So the site is really contained. The two nearest lots also happen to be owned by the applicant. So the next one is about traffic. The standard for traffic is a little tricky. It's not, will this generate traffic? Because every project I've ever done generates traffic. It's whether it will create traffic congestion. So, traffic congestion is somewhat arbitrary. It's really up to the special permit granting authority to decide what that means. In my opinion, that means you're going to have a level of service. So engineers grade level of service at intersections like you got in grade school, A, B, C, D, level of service F would be a problem, obviously. A facility like this based on 10 or 15 employees, I used 15 employees for traffic just to try to be conservative, to try to generate a number. And in doing that, it still comes out to about, honestly, 15, one trip per employee. So you're talking 15 to 20, even 20 trips. Your house generates 7 to 10 trips to kind of just give you a place to kind of anchor yourself. If you said 7 to 10 trips for a house on 46 acres, and if you had frontage on Abbey Road, you could fit 4 or 5 houses at this location by right. So if you make that comparison, just to kind of illustrate what we're talking about as far as quantity, so that it's something you can relate to, this is similar to 1 or 2 residential homes, and 4 or 5 residential homes could fit on this lot. So it's not, it's in character with what I would expect in a rural community in Berkshire County as it relates to traffic. And it's certainly not going to, the experts could disagree with me and say, oh, Jim, you're wrong. It's 22 trips and not 16. I accept that. But I'm looking for traffic congestion. And the fact is if the standard is traffic congestion and I have a level of service A, or if it even went to level of service B, those are both excellent levels of service and would come nowhere close to meeting the standard of the special permit granting authority having to decide whether or not this creates congestion. So we don't come anywhere near that standard as it relates to traffic. I'm very comfortable with that as a professional engineer. If you wanted to debate a trip or two, I'm not prepared to do that. But based on a ITE analysis under a light industrial use with that number of employees inflated 50%, I still can't find where there's any traffic impact. Will not overload any public utilities. So let's talk about that. We don't have any public utilities. So we don't have sewer, we don't have water. So this project's completely independent and isolated from any town services as it relates to sewer. So the only one I could think of was stormwater. And, as I mentioned earlier, I've got hundreds of pages of engineering analysis that I've stamped that talk about how I designed all these ponds and pipes and recharge measures and infrastructure as it relates to this project to control and mitigate stormwater in accordance with the 10 stormwater management standards here in Massachusetts. So the only thing I can think of as it relates that the board could have concern with, I tried to address up front by installing a very detailed stormwater system. So that really leads me to my conclusion that all the special permit criteria, those 5 criteria have been met or exceeded. And that would pave the way for us to have a discussion and maybe answer questions. I know there's other questions, but they aren't necessarily relevant to this proceeding. I think there's conservation questions for sure. We're along the buffer zone, and I have to get a permit from the Conservation Commission, but that may not be relevant here. So we're not avoiding issues or questions. We're just trying to answer those in the right silos or buckets So I have conservation questions with the Conservation Commission. I'll have cannabis-related questions with the Cannabis Control Commission. And I have zoning questions here in this room today. So that's what we're trying to focus on. We did receive a letter from an attorney, and just a few things in that letter that I took exception to that I just like to mention while I have the floor and I'm on the record. This use is not agricultural in nature. We're not suggesting it is. If it were, we wouldn't be here. We would have just filed for a building permit. We understand that this use is special under a commercial greenhouse application, or maybe under other if you felt it appropriate. But either way, the table of use requirements allow us to at least apply. I don't think that's out of line. And I think that suggesting that we're looking to find some loophole under agricultural is disingenuous, honestly, that we're proposing here for a special permit. We understand it's special. We've gone through a lot of effort here to show you that we're taking it seriously. Again, item number 24 on page 25 of your bylaw talks about other uses. So the question or comment was that this couldn't possibly be a commercial greenhouse because of the use. Well, I'm not sure I agree with that. I mean, if you have put broccoli in here, if you've driven by a farm that grows broccoli, it stinks. So they never do anything about it. There's no odor control expert in those meetings. So the fact is that, is this agricultural? Well, it could be, but it's not. So we're here to apply for a permit. And, so we think under the zoning on that second line 24 of the table of use requirements that it's allowed. It talks about accessory uses in the proposed building. I think this graphic shows you here on page 5 what I'm talking about. I have a 5,000 square foot building, literally 5% of the overall size of this project. Inside of that, I got a few hundred square foot container where I'm doing some lab work. I'm basically going to hang plants up and dry them in this building. That's what they're going to do. They're going to dry them out, and they're going to put them in this little container that you have in your backyard when you move. They're going to put them inside a laboratory inside that container, which has about 10 certifications. I can't quote them. I don't know if there's really 10, but there's a list. And they're going to extract oil from the plants. I mean, to say that that's not accessory to growing the material, I disagree with. So I think that concludes my application. Again, we feel that we've met the criteria under the zoning. We understand we have work to do. I still need to draw construction drawings. I'm here to answer any of your questions. We're happy to collaborate with folks in town and do the right thing as an applicant. And we appreciate everyone's time, and we appreciate the consideration from the board. So I'll turn it over to the select board. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. So I'm going to start off with questions from the select board, and I will start with Mark Newman first, and then George Riley, and then myself. Then after that, I'll go on to any town officials in the room, such as the fire chief, police chief that may have questions, and then we'll open it up for public questions after that. So Mark.
Give us a rough idea of the total area to be cleared. Can you give us a rough idea of the total area to be cleared for the site?
Yes, I believe you're in the 4.5, 5 acre range total.
Okay. And you mentioned composting of the waste material.
Yes, sir.
Is that, I'm assuming that would be inside the fenced area?
That's correct.
And your plan doesn't show a specific site. That is there a specific facility for that?
I believe so. There isn't a designated area outside. It's inside where they when you have the clippings, that material is in the greenhouses. So there isn't a heap or a pile outside. It's managed inside each greenhouse.
Okay. Thank you. Go ahead.
All right. I have a number of questions, and I apologize, ask everyone's pardon for taking up your time. But as you know, this is the largest commercial operation ever proposed in the town of Sandisfield. And so the Board of Selectmen has a special obligation to do due diligence and carefully. It's not a traditional agricultural project, and so we do need to give it a bit of extra scrutiny. Now, as the folks in Sama know, the town of Sandisfield has developed a proposed cannabis bylaw, which is going to be voted on at town meeting on May 15th. And even though this bylaw is not yet in effect, it does express a lot of the best thinking in town regarding such a project. And the select board is authorized as the special permit granting authority to attach any conditions or requirements which it feels will fulfill its duty to protect the health, safety, and general welfare of our citizens. So I'm therefore going to be citing this proposed bylaw occasionally in my questions. But first of all, I want to go to the application itself. On page 1 in the application, there is described the record title stands in the name of Bobrick Paul Estate of Miskowski James. Now, this application is dated February 2021. And this land was sold from that estate to Franklin Woods Investment. And that sale was recorded September 8th, 2020. And then it was sold by Franklin Woods Investment in turn to Abbey Road Land LLC. And that was sold in December 2nd, 2020, and recorded January 6th, 2021. So this application that we have, dated February 2021, signed by John Heck as the applicant, and G. William Heck as the property owner. Why is the deed referred to, not the current deed, but the deed from not one owner back, but two owners back?
That was,
Can you explain that?
yes. For your record, Jim Scalise, I made a mistake. There's a website that we referred to, and its records were outdated. I wasn't aware of it, so we made a mistake. But I've actually submitted this evening a correction that's part of the record, as well as these drawings. And there's copies of letters, 4 letters and 4 sets of plans that were submitted when I arrived here, when you opened the public hearing tonight, to correct that.
Okay. You're probably aware of the fact that there is a deed restriction on that deed.
Yes.
And that, of course, is essentially an issue between the owners, Abbey Road LLC, and the sellers. It doesn't involve the town, except that in our proposed bylaw, we ask that the owner shows control of the property. So it's important to us as a select board that we have that issue resolved, so that we can be satisfied that the owner of the property actually does have control of the property and the ability to operate a marijuana growing establishment.
Yes, it's, we looked at this. We believe there's obviously a disagreement about the deed, but we don't think that's relevant under zoning. And we think the fact that there's clear title and that we own it is control, is adequate to establish control. The fact that there's a closing and that we purchased the property. So we think we meet the control. We think there's potentially a debate to be had about the wording of the deed, but there's no debate about the control of the property by the applicant.
All right. You have had submitted to you a document called Still Needed for Sama Special Permit Application. And the first item there was the name, address, and contact information of each owner and operator of the establishment. The CO, where the owner is a business entity, the names and addresses of each controlling person as defined in 935 CMR 500 shall be provided. The COO and CEO shall be identified, and the name and contact information of the security officer shall be provided. So I would like the select board to receive that document. The other issue, which has not been addressed up till now, is the issue of noise. In the information that we requested, we wanted information demonstrating that the applicant has considered the following factors. And among those factors is sound mitigation measures that minimize increases in ambient sound levels, including variable frequency drives to reduce fan speeds and fan sound when feasible, and or installing fan treatments, for example, silencers or acoustically lined plenums. This is an issue, but probably quite aware that the ambient noise level at that site is a question of sound mitigation does become an issue. And I think I, as a select board member, would like to hear more information about that. The lighting issue you spoke to, and I think that was satisfactory. In the question of water usage, there is an error there on page 13 where you say, at one point it's spoken of as water usage as 2,000 a day, 2,000 gallons a day. Another point on page 13, let me just get it here. Excuse me. You say seasonal water use is less than 500,000 gallons per year. The season is approximately 240 days, and thus the water use is expected to be 1,250 to 2,000 gallons per day. But earlier in the application, you gave a calendar for the growing season, and that was beginning in March and ending in October. So that season is actually not 240 days, but 180 days. And therefore, water use would average out to 2,800 gallons per day. So I just wanted to correct that because that was not a correct calculation based on the season that you had already given us. You do include in here the energy compliance guidelines from the Cannabis Control Commission. They're all listed in detail, but there's no indication of how Sama is planning to comply with these guidelines. And I think I would like to know what Sama's response is to the Cannabis Control Commission energy compliance guidelines. So if you would include that documentation, that would help. Pesticides and fungicides. In the last paragraph of attachment I, you say that the Cannabis Control Commission, let me just read that. This is attachment I with the fertilizer description. Sama will adhere to the guidelines published by the CCC to stay compliant with any applications of pesticides or fungicides. The CCC puts products through rigorous safety tests before approving them. That last sentence actually is not correct. The CCC does not put products through any kind of safety tests. They use the standard Massachusetts listing of pesticides and fungicides that are, there's a list that the state of Massachusetts has of prohibited pesticides and fungicides, and the CCC simply refers growers to that list. Despite that fact, I would like to invoke the section of the proposed marijuana bylaw, which says that that Sama will inform the special permit granting authority of any use of pesticides, fungicides, or herbicides, whether organic or not. And that at any time during the operation, if that use were to increase by more than 10%, that again, the special permit granting authority would be notified. I think that's important, again, for us to be able to do our due diligence in regard to health and safety. All right, that's pretty much what I had. I do have some questions about odor to the representative there. And that has to do with the generation of hydroxyls. You use a catalyst. Is that catalyst titanium?
No, sir, we don't actually require a secondary reaction. That's one of the differentiating factors of our technology versus most of the others out there that claim to produce hydroxyls.
Okay. The scientific literature indicates that formaldehyde and acetaldehyde are common byproducts of hydroxyl treatments. And as you know, these are highly carcinogenic substances. How do you propose to deal with any production of those chemicals?
So part of the reaction process that we have in reaction with organic VOCs, so currently, we're speaking right now, you and I are both, and our bodies through natural respiration are producing aldehydes, ketones, and these type of products. They're always present in the atmosphere so long as respiration's occurring. And it gets into a bit of organic chemistry, but these same products are being degraded in the natural atmosphere through the Earth's natural processes. All that we're effectively doing is accelerating that degradation process. So we don't differ in the sense that we're creating a new byproduct. We're just kind of speeding up what Mother Nature is doing.
Well, again, that's not what the scientific literature indicates. It indicates that actually formaldehyde is one of the byproducts of the hydroxyl reaction.
I would need to be able to see that literature and review it in order to validate the claim. I'm not familiar with the study that you're referring to, so.
Okay, well, we can talk about that later then.
Sure.
My only question is that apparently you are not saying that you've ever encountered this problem before?
Correct. No, we've never had any issues with the detection of significant chemical byproducts as a result of the use of our systems. In fact, we've only ever seen a reduction of them in any measurement standard.
All right. There's another question, which is a much more, not really a concern for the town, but it would be a concern for Sama as a cannabis grower, that these hydroxyls also can activate on surfaces as well and deactivate certain products. So for example, on the leaves of the cannabis plant, on the buds of the cannabis plant, it can deactivate terpenes, which is an undesirable effect. It doesn't affect us as a town, but certainly would affect Sama. Are you familiar with that?
So the effect that we demonstrate on surfaces is actually a much lower impact than what we actually do in there. And a big part of the reason for that is hydroxyls themselves, again, they only exist in the presence of these specific wavelengths of light. And once they're produced, they have a half-life, if you will, of a few milliseconds. By that point in time, they've then reacted with something else in the atmosphere and started this cascading process of, reacting with a substance, which then breaks into something else that's needing to react with something else, and so on down the line. I equated it a lot to throwing a rock in a pond, right? The hydroxyl generation is the actual rock hitting the surface, very big splash. But the secondary and tertiary reactions that follow on from that point are the ripples that carry on. So from the perspective of what we've seen anecdotally at least, in other facilities that use this technology, which, by the way, there is another one in Massachusetts currently that's just deployed this. The result is actually a benefit to the plants for a number of reasons. One, that surface reaction does help to mitigate the pathogens, bacteria, mold, things like that on the plants themselves, so they don't have to fight those things off as aggressively. And as far as terpene degradation, I have not seen any detrimental impact in that respect.
Okay, as I said, it doesn't really concern the town, except to the extent that if you did experience terpene degradation, you might have to dial back the Odorox, the intensity of that treatment, which could create other problems.
Right, and again, we're producing to a target level that is acceptable in a medical setting, while still maintaining the effect that we need in the space. So we're not producing to such a level that it would actually cause harm, if that's a good way of describing it.
And you're reasonably confident that 2 of these units in each greenhouse is going to do the trick?
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Okay. My last question, and this is for the Sama folks, although it's partly for you as well, and it's really my main concern, is the conversion laboratory. And this is going to be is going to use extraction solvents that are going to produce highly volatile VOCs. In the 28 pages of manufacturing hype, there was in a whole long list of models, designs, sizes, features, and options, there was no indication of what is actually the model or size or options that Sama is going to use. So there's a whole plethora of possibilities presented there, but no indication of what was actually going to be put on site. So I would like to know how these very volatile solvent VOCs are going to be neutralized prior to discharge into the environment. What measures are you going to take to prevent these from penetrating either the air or the septic or groundwater systems?
I have limited technical understanding, information. The expectation is that these odor control technologies will be very effective at addressing the VOCs. And there's absolutely no release outside the lab of any of these materials.
So you're going to use the same technology for the lab as well?
Yes.
Okay. Then my final question, if you've looked at the proposed cannabis bylaw, it provides for setbacks. Now, for a tier 1 facility in the proposed bylaw, that's the size of your processing building. There is proposed a 75-foot setback. And my question would be, is there any reason why a 75-foot setback would not be feasible for this project?
The site as it lays out is located near a town hill, if you look at a map. And so with that said, as you move this facility south, you're required to either step up that hill or cut into it. So I drew this plan maybe 4 times trying to figure out the grading, which is pretty typical. That's how engineers, it's a little trial and error there. But this kind of fits. This is what fit best out of the efforts made to avoid, gross excavation. And because as you go further south, the limit of clearing beyond the facility starts to grow exponentially, right? So you get this big long slope with a lot of trees removed. So in an effort to kind of make this site dense and as small as possible and to avoid excess earth removal and earthwork, this is what fit. I tiered the site. I tried that a couple of times to get these elevations set. There's 5 feet of grade between the lower tier and the upper tier, and then I raised this one up and down. It's 7 feet higher. So as you lay out these pods of greenhouses on this site, it's really related to the lot configuration and the topography. Those are typically under zoning, pretty strong arguments. So I thought there'd be some willingness to discuss it. You know, if you go for a variance, for example, topography is often a topic. So that was kind of the context of my decision, but there was quite a bit of effort made to move this away from the wetlands and move it south. So I think the ability to do that exists, but I think that it would create a much larger footprint.
Are these greenhouses required to be on the same level, or are they banked up?
What I did is each group of greenhouses is on the same level. So I created like 3 steps. There's 3 pods of greenhouses. I labeled them area 1, 2, and 3. And each one is on a different level. And then, because what happens is as you increase that change in level, then you have driveways that need to slope down or slope up. And I have that around the ends of the greenhouses. And then you have, a setback between the 2 pods to allow the 7 feet of elevation change to occur. So as you increase or decrease the amount of earthwork as it relates to the footprint, adjustment to this would create, like I said, just a lot more work, a lot more earthwork, and a lot more clearing, and a much larger footprint. Now, I can't tell you exactly, but I've drawn it out, and
Yeah.
It's much larger.
But if you staggered the heights or created more greenhouse pods by dividing maybe the 2 big ones up, then your net amount of earthwork would be decreased.
Potentially, but what happens is it's self-defeating in that as you create tiers, in between the tiers, I need space to allow the elevation change for vehicles, because I'm trying to create a ring road. So as the north and south pods, which are on the left towards the wetland, there's quite a space between them. And the reason for that is the grade change. I got 7. So as I create more pods, every pod has a setback to allow that elevation change to occur and for a vehicle to drive around the site with some degree of comfort. You can't have vehicles trying to drive over 2-foot high speed bump kind of a thing.
Right, I understand that. What's the current setback? What's the distance between the closest, which would be the northeast greenhouse, the northeast corner of the northeast greenhouse, to the property boundary?
The corner of the building is what you're asking?
Yeah. The greenhouse itself
It's 40 feet to the property line.
is 40 feet. Okay. And the perimeter fence then goes pretty much right up to it.
It's 12 feet. Yep.
Okay. All right, thank you. I don't have any more questions.
Thank you, George and Mark. So I have a couple questions and one just clarification. Jim, you talked about the total clearing is between 4 and 5 acres. So if I do my math correctly, we have 46 acres of property in Lot 8. Is that correct?
Yep. 46.7.
So that's surface area.
Mhm.
And you're going to clear approximately 220,000 square feet. So
Yeah.
you're clearing about 10% of the
Yeah.
total.
I think the exact math is a little less than 10,
Okay.
but yes, sir. Yep.
I just did it quick in my head.
Yeah.
Okay. My questions are related to construction and timing, et cetera. So, should you be granted a special permit at some point in time here, what would be the projected ideal start date? Is it something within this calendar year or the next calendar year? What is the timing of that?
That's a Cannabis Control Commission question. I'm going to
Okay.
ask.
Yeah, I mean, that's really what it goes to. The way the queue works in the Cannabis Control Commission is not clear. Generally speaking, you wait until you get a provisionary license, although that is not cast in stone. So I'm sorry to say, I don't have an answer as to what our start date would be.
So that your construction time is going to be based on if and when you get a license from the CCC. Should you be granted a special permit from the select?
To be candid, we're discussing that internally. We are very, we're scrutinizing the construction requirements from the commission, as well as Sandisfield's construction requirements. And we're not building an office building or even a mall. So the other end of that spectrum would be that we could consider a much faster construction period with the idea that we could build to the specs of the commission. But again, I'm not saying that we've decided that, number one. And number two, we haven't done a deep dive as to how the commission's interpretation of their regs would or would not allow us to do that.
Okay. All right. My next question would be in terms of the lighting for Clint. So it's all motion activated. Should there be a trigger of the lighting? Does the lighting come on in groups, or does the entire perimeter lighting come on at once, or how would that work? What can you share as part of the security plan without divulging too much?
The perimeter security system within the fence is zoned, and would follow, the lighting would follow that. So there's several zones around the perimeter, and in the event that there was motion in one zone, just the lighting for that zone would come on.
Okay.
If someone moved from zone to zone, the lighting will follow them. And again, the dwell time on that lighting being on is programmable down to a minute.
Okay. And there's certain regulations that you have to capture so many minutes of video, I believe, if I've read the CCCs in terms of your security plan. So I'm sure that would correspond with the lighting, correct?
Correct. And the same as the dwell time, because we would have to be able to recognize a face. And the cameras will also be low light cameras, so that in down to a half a lux of light, even without illumination on, they'll still be operational.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And then one other question was, there was mention that there is another one of the odor mitigation control systems in Massachusetts. Where is that currently at?
That particular facility is in New Bedford.
New Bedford, Mass? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Do you know the name of it, obviously?
I do, but I'm not sure based on NDA whether I'm able to disclose that.
Okay. Not a problem.
Sorry.
Not a problem. All right. Thank you. Mark asked my question about the composting area. So let's see. Okay, that'll answer my questions. So at this point, I would open it up to any of our town officials. I see we have Ralph Morrison, our fire chief. Ralph, do you have any questions? And if you do, I'd like you to use the mic, okay? No questions? Brad, DPW, no questions? Joanne, our town manager, no questions? Is Mike here? Okay. With the masks, I can only recognize about half of the people in the audience. Between that and my eyesight going as I get older. George?
Just a quick follow-up question. My understanding is that at night, and this is for Clint, when there is no activity in the perimeter, that the establishment is completely dark. All right, thank you.
Okay, then at this point in time, I would open it up for questions from the public. We're going to start with folks on Zoom. Sean, how many participants do we have on Zoom?
We've got 39.
Okay, so we're going to start with the participants on Zoom. We are going to do 5 individuals on Zoom, 3 minutes each with your questions, and please allow whoever they pertain to answer appropriately. Then we'll move on to the next person. And then we will do 5 questions from the general public in the room if there are any. Okay. So do we have someone identifying themselves with a question, Sean?
I don't see any active hands up, so let's just start. Actually, we do have. Let's go with Laura C. Please unmute your mic.
Okay. Laura, please identify yourself before you ask your question.
I can't unmute.
Go ahead, Laura.
All right, I was having a hard time unmuting. Okay, yes, so it's Laura Rogers Castro, and I'm at 107 Town Hill Road. So I had the opportunity a week ago to view some presentations by scientists of current cannabis research during an Entomological Society of America meeting. I've been a member of this organization for over 30 years. I hold a Master's of Science in Entomology, the study of insects. So what I learned during the meeting and the presentations has raised some concerns. So as you know, although personal and medicinal use of cannabis is legal in Massachusetts, it's still federally against the law. So this is important because there's no federal money available for research. So there has been little research conducted on the growth of cannabis for marijuana. It's a relatively new industry. So most growers have no real commercial growing experience. Growers follow what is sometimes referred to as bro science or stoner science, sharing information based on what they've experienced in the field. Much of this bro science plays out on the internet, and practicing entomologists have concerns over the misidentification of the insect pests and diseases, as the control for one might be different than for the other. So one example seen on the internet was the photo of what's referred to as insect frass. That's actually insect poop. These black specks were misidentified in the bro science world as being from thrips, which is a type of insect. And in reality, on closer examination, there was an early instar corn earworm caterpillar creating the insect poop as it feeds. I know everyone's seen a corn earworm because it's a terrible pest of corn, and we all try to avoid the worms when we buy our sweet corn. In cannabis, corn earworm can damage the flower buds. So the implications of misidentifying one insect for another might mean the wrong pest control is used. So there are a lot of insect pests that attack cannabis, including typical greenhouse pests such as flower thrips, onion thrips, cannabis aphids, spider mites, hemp mites, and rice root aphids. So spider mites are a big problem because they prefer warm, humid environments, and using the natural control of predatory mites. So those are good mites that eat bad mites. That can be a problem because then you raise the humidity for the predatory mites to thrive, potentially creating more mold on the cannabis. So one internet site for cannabis organic pesticide control recommended predatory mites, but showed a picture of an entirely different insect. So again, bad internet information. And then if a grower chooses to use pest strips, which are recommended on the internet, it's illegal to do so as there's toxic chemicals on the strips. So cannabis aphids, they were first reported in North America in 2016. They're now found coast to coast in the United States, and they reduce the flower quality and yield. So this particular pest management and biology is poorly understood. Sometimes growers use a foliar milk application. That is, they spray milk on their crop to control the aphids. And this is in violation of the EPA, as it is not labeled for use. Not to mention the milk smell is terribly bad in the summer. So sometimes injuries from insects can change a plant's chemistry and increase the THC. So of course, that's the chemical producing the high, and that can be increased above the legal limit. And since it's highly regulated, that and if the level exceeds the THC, the plant must be destroyed.
Laura?
So I'm almost done.
Okay.
There's also plant diseases, powdery mildew, and so forth. And typically the farmers rely on extension services from state universities, but these extension services can't exist because they're paid by federal funding. So my point is, with all these uncertainties regarding the success of the industry, The fact that biological or natural control is not simple, potential for misuse of pest control with possible environmental contamination, I feel it would be prudent for Sandisfield to start small and would discourage the select board from authorizing a special permit for such a big facility. So my question actually is, what is SAMA's experience in this industry? And how are they going to address the pest control? And where are they going to be getting their pest control advice?
John, would you like to address that? Okay, we've got a partner on Zoom that will address that, Laura. Thank you. There's a question and answer period, yep. So 5 people on Zoom, then 5 public.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
My name is Jared. I am the head of cultivation for Sama. First off, you are right in that it is very hard to, control these things, and there's not a lot of resources available. That being said, we are taking a few precautions. First off, all of our greenhouses are isolated from each other. So that's, we'll be doing lots of observation. In the event of a flare-up, we will reach out to, some of our closely related consultants. They're not FDA funded or federally funded, but they are, they've been in this industry for 20 years. We have a few different suppliers that we work for that do manage insectaries, and they are very familiar with these pests. So each one is a case-by-case basis, and we are aware that it's not going to be easy, but we are also taking other precautions in that we are going to be shutting down the operation through the winter. It's not a continuously evolving and, or should I say, continuously producing, project that like an indoor grow has, harvest every 2 weeks throughout the year. We're going to be shutting down, for 6 months or 4 months to overwinter our greenhouses, let things freeze, let things die, figure out, what happened, where, how we can address it better in years to come, and treat each one as a case-by-case basis.
Thank you. Okay, another question from Zoom, Sean?
Yeah, next we have Lorraine Greenwell. Please unmute your mic, Lorraine.
Is this Lorraine or is it Jay?
Jay. It's Jay.
Hi, Jay. Please state your name and then ask your question.
Yes,
I am doing 3-minute timers on the questions, okay?
sure. My name is Jay Greenwell, 157 Town Hill Road. I'm a land surveyor and land planner licensed in New York and New Jersey. In the right location, this Sama project might make sense, but deep in the forest, adjacent to residential properties on an unpaved road off of a marginally paved road, it does not. This project envisions 105,000 square feet of buildings tantamount to the size of a Home Depot. And what I scaled off as over approximately 10 acres of land disturbance off of the sheet 1. This is thick forest land adjacent to a protected wetland and a state forest. It involves the installation of 41 parking lot style lights, a forbidding privacy fencing around the entire property. And this is not what the current special permit for commercial greenhouses was meant to allow. Many of us were in attendance at the Conservation Commission on March 16th, at which time the application of the NOI for Sama Productions was scheduled to be heard. Due to deficiencies in the notice to the abutters and the fact that the application was not consistent reflecting the actual owners and or applicants, the engineer representing Sama requested an extension, and it was our understanding that the plans were going to be modified to eliminate any incursion into the wetland buffer and that the Conservation Commission approval would not be necessary. New plans were posted for this project, last revised 3/25/21. I think it's absurd to think that plans that are submitted on 3/25 right before a weekend is hardly, and to be reviewed on 3/29 is hardly sufficient to allow members of the community time to review these plans with any detail, not even giving the board the chance to review them with enough time. However, a quick review of the plans that have been modified as of March 25th depicts multiple wetland impacts as noted below. And in fact, on several of the sheets that were shown tonight, the wetlands buffer of the 50-foot and the 100-foot were not even shown. The extensive filling is proposed in the buffer near the northwesterly corner of the greenhouse area, with resulting steep slopes that are difficult to stabilize and could easily end up conveying silt into the wetlands to the west. Perimeter fencing and gravel access roads and retaining walls around the greenhouses are still in the buffer zone. The proposed 25-foot grass filter strip intending to mitigate surface water runoff is entirely within the 100-foot wetland buffer, adjacent to the 50-foot wetland buffer. There are cuts as deep as 14 feet and fills as deep as 8 feet. There's a tremendous amount of earth to be moved around on site. I'm running out of time, so I'm going to skip to my last comment, which is that with all of the issues that the engineer spoke of about grading, setbacks, and wetland buffer incursion, this project cries out for a major revision to a smaller project that should not be in the wetland buffer with reasonable setbacks. The compensation for removal of hundreds of trees along Abbey Road is the solution to plant 11 1-inch caliper trees, spaced 40 feet apart. The floor of the greenhouses is about 15 feet above Abbey Road, and the greenhouses are 16 feet high, meaning that the top is going to be about 30 feet above the road. They're 35 feet or 40 feet away from the road. These scrawny 1-inch plantings will be hardly sufficient to screen this for decades. I think this is totally inappropriate. I think it's totally out of line with the bylaws that were carefully crafted by the planning board and the select board, and does not deserve to be built in this site. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jay. I'm just going to remind everybody that we are in a question and answer period. We are not in a commentary period. So for the folks on Zoom, because I can't see you, please, if you have a question, let's ask the question. If you have a commentary, please wait until later after the folks in the room here can ask their questions and get their answers. We will give you time for both, but I do not want any commentary at this point. I want to get questions answered and then move on to commentary, okay? So thank you. Do we have another
Yes, we
person,
have
Sean?
John Schweitzer. John, please unmute your mic.
John, please identify yourself.
Hi, I'm John Schweitzer from 2 Chestnut Hill Road. My wife and I have the house at 2 Chestnut Hill Road. I started coming to the Berkshires when I was 4 years old and have spent every year in the Berkshires since then. So I love it. And I'm glad to be in Sandisfield. And I want to thank you for your help on the select board and all your good work. I have a couple of questions. I read your 173-page document, and I was unable to really ascertain for myself, or maybe for anybody else, the management of this project. Who are the managers? And I assume that they include Mr. Heck and his brother, but I don't know who they are. I don't know what qualifies them to manage a project like this and make sure that it has a financially feasible and reliable outcome. So I'd like to know more about that. I'd like to know about a market analysis. I saw nothing about a market analysis. I don't see how you can measure what you're doing without finding out what the potential market is for the Sama product. So I'd like to find out about that. And their marketing strategy was obviously still not present at all. I'd like to know who they're planning on selling this to and how they're planning on selling it, and how they can make this a successful business. And they didn't touch upon, as far as I could tell, any financial planning or projections. I'd like to know what their financial plans are, at least for the next 1 to 3 years, and what their projections of profits and budgets and all the financial stuff that businesses are made of. It's very important for us to know that they're going to be successful if they enter into this venture, because we're going to wind up holding the bag If they fail, we're going to spend our money, our good money, cleaning up their monstrous error, if it is an error. So I'm very concerned about that as well. The rest is commentary. So I want to thank you again to the planning board. And I would like to hear some answers to my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schweitzer. John, would you like to address some of those questions?
Dave Ross will handle some of that. Dave Ross, please unmute your mic.
Okay. How's everybody doing? David Ross here, another principal of Sama. Obviously, the majority of our information is not going to include our entire business plan. As far as our qualification goes, my father grew up in Berkshire County. I had moved out to Oregon about 10 years ago to pursue the cannabis industry, where we started out as farmers and we ended up developing into a greenhouse manufacturing company as well as suppliers in this industry. So we've had the benefit of not only farming, we've had the benefit of building facilities around the entire country as well as supplying materials to the foremost cultivators in the entire country. So we've gotten to accelerate our knowledge base quite proficiently over time to be able to really build a perfect model. I'm not necessarily prepared to disclose everything to do with how we're financially going to be a profitable business. What I can explain to you for the most part is that we are the most capable at what we do at producing products at a minimal cost to have low overhead, and we know how to weather a storm. We've dealt with dealing with that in Oregon, where we had a really, really great marketplace that took a crash, and we're still here. I mean, we went from products they started at $2,000 a pound, for instance, which was the max that Oregon ever had, down to $500. Massachusetts currently is close to $4,000 per pound retail, to just give you an idea of that. And we were able to continue to be profitable in Oregon when the market was at 500. I don't know if that suffices your questions enough, but that's all I'm really willing to disclose at this time that has to do with our financial business plan. Thank you.
If I may, just let me add one quick point. As we understand it, the financial disclosures are not part of a special permit application. They are, however, an integral part of the Cannabis Control Commission's requirements for us to be fully licensed and supervised now and throughout the future.
That is correct, John. Thank you for that. David, do you want to speak? It's Brian. I know you can't see me. It's Brian O'Rourke. So do you want to speak as to who your potential customer base is, or is that proprietary and not something you'd like to talk about at this point?
Oh, no, I mean, I feel fine with it. I mean, obviously our entire customer base is almost every dispensary in Massachusetts. They're the customer base. They're the only ones allowed to sell our product. I mean, as far as a marketing plan, I mean, we produce a really great product. We produce it naturally. We care about the environment. We're trying to produce something that people feel good about ingesting. That's the purpose of who we are and what we do, and that's what we represent. I mean, there's not much else really to it. Good price. It's, you know, naturally produced. It's every client base is just really dispensaries in Massachusetts.
So the question from someone in the audience was, when you say we, who are you referring to as we? Because you hear you're a brand new company, so.
And you mean that by like a sales staff, or just literally me, Bill, John, and Jared?
Well, are you referring to Sama? That's your goal, is to produce what you just stated product, or are you referring to your past business practices in Oregon?
No, I'm not referring to my past business practices in Oregon. I might not completely understand the question about where we're going to sell the product that we're producing in Massachusetts. Correct?
Well, the term we, you're referring to Sama, is that correct?
Yeah, of course, yeah. our entities out in Oregon supply materials for the industry. We sell supplies. We don't produce cannabis.
Okay, I'll follow up on that, Alex. We got two more from Zoom and then, okay. So next person from Zoom, please.
Next is Leslie Garwood. Please unmute your mic.
I'm trying to. Okay. Hi, Leslie and John Garwood from 16 West Hubbard Road. Thank you for the presentation. It's impressive. And thank you, George Riley, for bringing up a series of questions that I wanted to ask about the application and the signing and the deed. So I don't have to cover that. But I do have one question for the SAMA folks and another question for the select board. My question for the SAMA folks is about this piece of property. And, how did you find this piece of property and why did you choose this particular piece of property when you, in fact, in purchasing the property, knew that it had a covenant restricting the deed to building single-family home sites only? And you knew that other people would be buying the abutting properties also with the intention of building single-family homes, and that they were promised by the seller that all the lots on this property would only contain single-family homes. So my question is, why did you choose this particular piece of property?
The process of finding and selecting it was in a very traditional fashion.
I'm sorry, I don't know who's speaking to me. I can't see who's speaking right now.
This is John Heck.
Thank you.
So my brother and I are third generation real estate developers and investors. And it was a fairly traditional process of going online, looking at available sites. Chapin Fish had originally showed us this site when it was 133 acres being sold by the Bobrick estate. Because Bill is in Florida and Dave and Jared are in Oregon, we went most of well, it was probably, I don't know, remember exactly, but early to mid 2020 when we first identified the site, and they were unable to travel, so we had to put it on hold. And by the time they were able to travel, Mike Sanders had already bought the property. We continued our discussions because I had already been talking to Mike about the development that he's been doing south of Cronk Road. He knew our business plan and what our goals and objectives were. We were looking at properties on some of his subdivisions from Cronk Road, north of Abbey Road. And then he told us, look, I bought the Bobrick estate, 133 acres south of Abbey Road. And I think that the what is now lot 8 is going to be most suitable for you. And we agreed. We walked it. It looked good to us. And it's not for this forum to discuss the ultimate deed restriction issues, but they were not present at the time we made a decision to buy this.
The restrictions were not there.
Correct.
Well, they're on the deed now.
Like
So-
I said,
Which you have not shown to the public.
not in this forum. That's a complete
Show the deed.
Deeds are, I'm sorry, sir, deeds are public records and they're readily available to anybody in the public who chooses to look them up. So it's in the public record that you have a deed with this restriction clearly stated on it.
I agree that that is in the public record. My point is that this special permit hearing is not the forum to discuss whatever issues arise about the deed.
So court is.
Well, I would disagree with that, but okay. I'll move on to my other question for the select board. And Brian and Mr. Newman, Mr. Riley, you don't necessarily need to answer the question. I just would like to know that since for almost 2 years, we've been going around in circles and back and forth about whether to have a zoning bylaw in the town, and we recently came up with a bylaw that will be on the warrant for a vote, this May. So, and it limits us to a maximum of tier 3 cultivators, in this town. So my question then is why would you approve a special permit for a tier 11 facility that our future bylaws are not going to permit in this town?
This is Brian. I will speak on that, and if George and Mark want to, they can as well.
Okay, great.
We have a bylaw in place. We have no guarantees that the proposed bylaw will be approved at the annual town meeting. We have a special permit application that was submitted, and once it's submitted, we have 65 days to hold a public hearing. So we're just following the protocol and the letter of the law. Again, we have no idea what the outcome of the annual town meeting will be. And we have the 65-day window that we have to hold this public hearing. And so we're doing exactly what we're supposed to do.
I understand, and I hope I wasn't. I didn't want you to misunderstand my question. I wasn't assuming you would approve it and saying why would you approve it. I was just asking, the question in the context of what may occur in the future, and taking that into consideration as what potentially many people in the town would like.
I think
Thank you.
Question, so. George, Mark, do you have anything to add? Okay. Thank you. We have time for one more from Zoom.
Okay, next is Lynn Goller. Lynn, please unmute your microphone.
Thank you. I understand from what's been said that you will not be subject to environmental monitoring on the part of the EPA, the National EPA. Who will be doing monitoring of your facility? Who will be,
And hold on, would you please state your name for the record before you ask your question?
I'm sorry, Lynn Galler, Gremler Road.
Thank you.
So my question is, I understand that you will not be responsible to the EPA for environmental monitoring. Who will be doing environmental monitoring of your facility, and who will you be reporting to?
Jim?
Yeah, environmental monitoring can be a fairly broad topic, but from a wetlands perspective, it's managed locally through the Conservation Commission. There's no actual direct impacts to wetlands proposed. There is some work in the outer buffer zone. So monitoring will be a construction-related process. The project is over an acre in size, so it requires a stormwater permit from EPA. That's required before you start construction. So but it's all construction-related monitoring. Once construction is complete, there will be no environmental monitoring that I'm aware of. She has her hand up, just so you know.
Lynn, go ahead. You have to unmute.
Go ahead, Lynn. You can unmute now.
I don't understand. There is no monitoring required of any exhaust from the facility?
There is no monitoring required. That's right.
Exhaust into the water? I don't know. I operated a chemical facility. That seems very strange to me.
You didn't operate. There's no chemical discharge at the site that we're aware of, and there's no monitoring required under the regulations that I'm aware of.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we are gonna now go on to questions from the audience, one at a time. Thank you for raising your hand. We actually have some people over here that we're going to start with you, sir, and then we'll come back to you, sir, okay? Please state your name for the record.
Yeah, Bill Haynes, South Sandisfield Road. I'm a taxpayer, but not a voter. So, clarification. George said something about this being the biggest commercial enterprise in Sandisfield. I suspect logging is probably bigger than this, but that's just a clarification. Regarding the drip irrigation system, is there an estimate of the chemistry and the volume of water that would go through the plantings and enter the gravel bed in the greenhouses, if any?
It's de minimis.
So there's no
It really-
expectation.
I mean,
Yeah.
there's going to
You want me to speak to this a little bit, John?
the Cannabis Control Commission speaks to the fact that this is a very low usage and there's very little drip. And we have a stone bed under each plant as well.
And the second question, very quick, is I think we only have one phase power in town, and the electrical requirements to the facility are all completely acceptable within the power that's available.
Bill, before we move on, I'd like to enable my partner, Jared, who's the grow expert, to talk about the water. Jared, you want to unmute and hit it?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the way that we're going to be feeding our plants is a little more in line with traditional agriculture, in that we're going to be spreading bulk organic amendments over the top of the soil and then watering that in, similar to like how a cornfield gets spread with manure and then the rain pushes it down to the soil and the microbes eat it up, give it to the plants. So, you know, there will be periodic times where we'll be hand watering that top dressing in, maybe once every 2 weeks, just enough for the crust to get broken up and for the stuff to mix. From then on, we'll be running drip irrigation as our primary source. And we might have like a 5 to 10% runoff past what the plants can absorb. But for the most part, we're just going to be watering enough to saturate the beds, not completely flush through all of our stuff. You know, with more non-traditional agricultural settings where they're using synthetic nutrients, there is higher runoff needed. But our system is a little bit different in that we're mimicking kind of a rainforest soil approach where the plants feed off the microbes and we have just a nice, you know, soil that feeds the plants, and we're not flushing extra stuff. And what we're adding is not already pre-digested or chemically available. It needs to be broken down by microbes. So we're not going to be flushing everything right through and creating all kinds of runoff where we have a delicate balance we're trying to achieve.
Bill, you had another question? It should be. We've been in touch with Eversource, and we can work with single phase.
Okay, before we go further with the audience, I have to admit that I forgot to ask Dolores, our town clerk, if she had any questions as a town official. My apologies, Dolores. I'm sorry.
41-year resident of Sandisfield, registered voter. I've worked for the town for 23 years. Can you review the potential income for our town?
It has a range, Dolores. The current market price, as Dave mentioned earlier, is $4,000 a pound. Our yields can vary widely. We have not grown in Massachusetts before. So, you know, we could have 3,000 pounds, or we could have 5,000 pounds. And I don't want to quote what our expected yields are because it is variable, and I don't want excessive expectations surrounding it. The market prices can vary, but you know, if we were online now at 4,000 a pound, you know, the math can be done quickly.
So I understand correctly, you're donating $2,500 to our library for the next 5 years, $2,500 to our rec committee for the next 5 years, $10,000 to our highway department for the next 5 years, 3% of sales.
Yes, of gross.
Is there a low ballpark figure of, on your worst year, what we could obtain in revenue?
in the community impact fee, 90,000 is a number that we've been budgeting. I mean, like I said, that is, and the way we run our business models is very conservatively. That is not using $4,000 a pound, because we don't know how long it will take to get online, and we don't know where the market will be at that time. As I say, our business planning and forecasting is the most conservative scenarios, the lowest prices, the lowest yields, et cetera, et cetera.
But we would also be getting tax revenue from each of those greenhouses as if they were a building. We would be getting tax revenue on the equipment inside the building.
That has yet to be determined. We can say with certainty that you'll have the property tax revenue. We don't know what the treatment will be for anything else.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Dolores.
Thank you. Okay, Bill, you have a question?
I have a few probably short questions. In terms of the stormwater, what size rain event is it designed for? As we know, with climate chaos, rain events are getting larger and quicker. I'm just wondering if it's designed to handle what we anticipate will happen in the next 10 to 20 years.
A good question. I can put that in perspective for you. When I started, 100-year rainstorm was 6.4 inches of rain in 24 hours. So if you think of that in snow in Massachusetts, it's a factor of 10. So that'd be 64 inches of snow. This design based on, we use an online source now because the weather's climate change is very fluid. We're at 8.17 inches now is what this is designed for the 100-year storm. So I designed it for the 2, 10, 25, and 100-year storms. It's that way it balances. You know, you get that short rainfall in the summer, it can manage it. You get the huge hurricane, it can manage it. And that's a pretty elevated rainfall, pushing 8.2 inches of rain. That's a lot of water in one day. That means that there's 10 standards. So the primary standard that folks think of is the amount of water that runs off this forest right now. We measure things in cubic feet per second, which is like, I don't know, a few hundred gallons per minute. Okay, so this site probably has, I don't remember the numbers exactly, but it probably has 5 cubic feet per second of water that run off it during a rainstorm, a 10-year storm. And I have to match that. So I build all this impervious area, rooftops and gravel and parking lots and all that stuff. And then I run it into a pond, and the pond captures it and slows it down. And then in between every greenhouse, you've got a couple of pipes and crushed stone between them. You have 10, 12 feet between them. And in between that area, there's a trench with crushed stone and pipe that captures the clean rooftop water. It's retained, it's held, slowed down. So the amount of water that goes off of this site after it rains, after it's built, is actually less than goes off the site today. It's not that the water disappears, it's that the peak rate. So when you have a flood, it's a lot of water gets to the same place at the same time, right? So if I dump, instead of 5 CFS, if I dump for 6 minutes, 10 CFS, I create a flood. But if I let 5 CFS out for 20 minutes, I don't have a flood.
Alex, it's
Right.
Bill's time for questions.
So I'm creating ponds. That's right.
Okay.
Let's stick to the forum here.
I have 2 quick questions about lighting. I'll just put them together, and if you could forget them, I'll ask it again. One is the color of the lights. As reported in a recent Sky and Telescope, orange is the best color to avoid scattering, and blue is the worst. And a lot of these contemporary LED lights are blue, and I'm wondering if you'll be moving toward the orange part of the spectrum. And the other question is, I've seen a lot of motion sensors not working properly and just staying on indefinitely. Who will be maintaining these motion detectors and making sure that they're actually shutting off properly? Who will actually be maintaining that on the ground?
Thank you. As for the lighting, the spread, because it is a dark sky lighting configuration, all of the illumination from the light fixture will be downward. It will not be an orange light. I believe it will be more of a white to the naked eye LED light. As to your other question, does that answer your first question?
Yeah, it would be preferable if you could get something more like those sodium lights that are more orange. They're just better for dark sky. Even better, because some lights can reflect.
Right.
It's not all going to go down. It's going to bounce off things. And
Right.
the greenhouses are a light color. They're going to bounce the light around.
So the problem with the high pressure sodium is they're not an instant on fixture. They need to warm up, and it takes time for those to warm up, as opposed to an LED fixture, which comes on instantly.
And there's no orange LEDs. It's all white.
Well, we can look at the fixtures, but again, the fact that they're dark sky and facing down should have minimal effect. That and the fact that they're only on when they're triggered and they're on for a short dwell time.
Right, and that's my other question. Yeah, is how do you maintain that? Because I've seen a number of those lights that will stay on a lot longer or will stay on all night.
So the CCC regulations as it relates to security systems, the security systems at any cannabis facility has to be maintained and inspected every 30 days. So in the event that there was an errant motion detector, for whatever reason, it got knocked out of alignment or whatever the case, that would be adjusted within a 30-day period. Being that the lights would stay on for a longer period of time as the video is reviewed, and if we find that there's a light that's on for a longer period of time, then it could be addressed more frequently than the 30-day inspection period.
Also, wind events and branches moving can often set them off. And I'm wondering if there's a way to mitigate that.
I believe that they're set up to be either passive infrared or an actual phototype beam that needs to be completely blocked. So is there the possibility of false positives due to extremely heavy snow? Yes, but they would be stacked beams, so that if there was a bird or something else that triggered one beam, it wouldn't trip until two beams, if that's the system that we wind up using. Otherwise, it could be an external passive infrared type detector.
Okay, and I had questions about smell. Like I know that I've been told the Sheffield puts out a lot of odor, but there is the New Bedford facility, and I know you can't disclose their information, but is there a way to get their information to the select board, or somehow get the information back from them, how long they've been operating and how well that it's actually working, the odor mitigation, and how many months it's been going or years, and how it's working in other places in the country, maybe where it's been working?
Right. So the New Bedford facility specifically has actually just installed it. So I'm actually going there tomorrow to inspect it for commissioning. But as far as their output, I'm sure once we flip the switch, it'll be a dramatic improvement of what they're currently dealing with. But we do have other facilities in other parts of the country, other parts of the world, where we can share that data based upon their experiential output after putting the pure system in the buildings.
I think it'd be great to get that information to the.
Yep. No,
board.
we can definitely get some type of information, possibly cleaned of the client detail, but we can get some information back.
Thank you, Bill. Okay, we have next in line. We had some folks behind you, sir, that had their hand up for a while now. Please state your name for the record.
Yes, Mark Amenta, Town Hill Road.
Yes, Mark.
You touched base on noise. You didn't say, you talked about the fans. I'm assuming you're going to have generators there, that you're talking about having an earth buffer. I mean, today alone, we've had no power all day. And twice this week, we lost power. So I'm just wondering when these generators are going to kick in. If it happens to be the middle of the night, you have noise pollution.
That's something I guess I can get back to you on. The plan currently doesn't show any locations for generators. We don't have a generator pad. I haven't set that up on the drawings. So I don't have, I'm not sure the team has discussed that. So that's something I would have to get back to you on. But I don't have that included in the plan. And when I was talking about noise, and the site is, the greenhouses are set low. So this greenhouse is set 5 feet lower than the adjacent greenhouses. And physical barriers help shield noise. So I was just pointing out that in all cases, even this one that has earth behind it because it's cut into the hillside, these are all set low. And because of that, there's some physical barriers.
Creating the noise you're talking about?
The fans. There's fans on the west side of every greenhouse. Right. So there's And that's part of the odor control system is to, it's to circulate air, but there's
Yeah, well,
there's a fan.
once the air comes out 20, 30 feet from those fans, it's gonna go with the natural wind flow.
Understood.
You know?
Agreed. Yep.
So you're not gonna blow it into the state forest. It'll never make it there.
Agreed.
It's gonna come back to Town Hill, up by Yanner Park where you got your kids playing,
Yeah, the suggestion or implication you're making is that there'll be odor, and our reports and our analysis is saying that we won't have odor.
Okay, well, if you can find out more on the generators, I'd appreciate it.
Sure.
Okay, Dave, your mic should be open. You want to speak to the generator? And
I'm sorry.
Dave, before you go, any air released will have been treated by our odor control systems.
I was just going to speak to the backup generator because it all kind of encapsulates itself. The diesel generators that are made now, they're something called a sound attenuated enclosure that surrounds them, and they're used for that exact reason. So those are actually on trailers. They're mobile for a sense. So you wheel it up, it's tied into the main power supply, it's sound attenuated, and then if that's running, that's fine during the day. At nighttime, the exhaust fans aren't generally going to be running because it's not hot outside because they run on a thermostat. So they're not going to be cycling at nighttime as much as they would during the day. That's all I really have to say to that.
Okay, another question on the floor. This gentleman right up front, please, and then we'll go to Alex as the next one. Please state your name, sir.
My name is Steve Rubenstein. I live on Mountain Home Lane, and I have two questions. One has to do to the gentleman representing security issues. Should there be an intrusion at 3 o'clock in the morning, who responds to this?
Sandisfield Police Department.
Okay. My second question is, since the town is pretty deeply divided as to the pros and cons of this and other cannabis projects, is there any reason why this could not be voted on by the populace?
My mic on? Okay. So this is a special permit application. This is the process that we've followed since the bylaws have been in place. The select board is a special permit granting authority. I would let our town council speak on the legalities of changing that, but I think that, well, my personal opinion is this is a commercial greenhouse application. The word cannabis is what has caused a lot of the debate beyond that. And I believe that we're viewing it as exactly as it's being submitted, a commercial greenhouse application. So I'd let Jonathan speak on how we would go about changing that, but.
Thank you. I'm not asking how to change it. Frankly, I couldn't care one way or the other about this. I just wonder why with such a deep divide among the residents, there's no populace. I mean, Rome was ruled by a triumvirate. That's not the case here.
So up until this special permit application, the populace has never had an issue with the select board being the granting authority. So it's only because of this particular application that there's the heated debate. It's worked since its inception. If it ain't broke, why fix it? Would be my response.
Just to your question, sir, Jonathan Silverstein, Town Council. Under state law, the State Zoning Act, Chapter 48, Section 9, every zoning bylaw in every town provides for a special permit granting authority, one or more. In Sandisfield, your legislative body, town meeting, approved bylaws that set the select board as the special permit granting authority. I'm not aware of any community in which special permits are granted by ballot vote. I think that would require special legislation passed by the state legislature after being first requested by town meeting. And quite frankly, I don't see how that could practically be done because you need to have a public hearing process, and you can't have a public hearing process before the entire group of registered voters in the town. It just wouldn't work. So every single city and town in the state has special permit granting authorities. In Sandisfield, your legislative body, town meeting, chose the select board.
Thank you. And Alex, you will be our last person on the floor, then we'll go back to Zoom.
First question is about taxes versus impact fees, since that was brought up by a town official. Can anyone describe what the difference between a tax and an impact fee is?
Well, the impact fee that's negotiated in the host community agreement is 3%. That's been published online, what that agreement is. The taxes would be the property taxes, both on the land itself and then on the structures and the contents, and they'd be similar to what you or I pay as residents of the town. So there are two different things there.
So does that affect welfare of the, is that under the welfare of the special permit process? Is that included? Like the welfare of the town, the impact fees and the taxes?
In what way do you mean that, Alex?
I mean, is that appropriate to discuss here?
I would think, Jonathan, that would be okay to discuss that as it being as part of the welfare of the town, right?
It's a public hearing.
Yeah, it's a public hearing, absolutely.
Do you know what the assessed value or the town assesses for greenhouses, plastic greenhouses?
We don't have that data. Our assessor consulted with the assessor in Sheffield, where there are several of the grow facilities. Some are greenhouse, some are enclosed in steel buildings, and got a baseline number. But until the facility is constructed, it's based on what the construction costs are initially. So the projected revenue is somewhere in the neighborhood of $40,000 to $50,000 based on the 5,000 square foot building, the 23 greenhouses, the equipment in the building, the contents, etc.
Is that the construction assessed value or the long-term assessed value?
Long-term.
Okay.
Long-term, yeah.
I did reach out to the assessor's board and they said $7 per square foot for plastic greenhouse in excellent condition.
Right.
That would be about $10,000 in taxes. So I just I did some research there.
Right.
And is there, for the impact fee, are there certain things the impact fee can be used for versus not used for?
Not according to our host community agreement. There was an article in the Berkshire Edge a few weeks ago. I did not bring it with me tonight, but it talks about what Great Barrington is going to use their several $1 million of revenue for this year based on the impact fees. Our host community agreement is very specific that we can use it however the town officials deem it to be necessary to use. So,
but are there state laws about what impact fees, are we governed by state law?
I will allow Jonathan to answer that question.
No, there are no state laws that govern how impact fees can be used. And in fact, under state law, the general rule that would apply here, and the Department of Revenue has specified that any income from impact fees under host community agreements has to go into the general fund and can only be expended through the normal appropriation process by town meeting.
Okay. I have a building question for...
It's time's up, so I'm going to go back to Zoom, but I'll come back to you, Alex. Yes?
Brian, if I could just supplement
Sure.
Alex's question. The community impact fee is unlike any revenue source that Sandisfield or anywhere else in the state of Massachusetts has. And one of the things that we
Okay, so we're gonna go to Zoom? No? No questions on Zoom?
Wait, one just popped up.
Okay.
Laura RC. Please unmute your mic.
Laura,
Yes, it's unmuted. It's actually my husband this time.
Hi, this is Mario Castro from 107 Townhill Road. My question is, how much water are they going to be using in the growing season? Where the water comes from, and how are you going to keep the water from getting contaminated from all the chemicals you're going to be using?
First and foremost, there will be no chemicals used in any part of our processes. Second, the maximum we estimated. Our source of water will be a well that'll be drilled on site, and total usage at a peak time of maximum sunlight and high temperatures, et cetera, we expect to be no more than 13 to 15,000 gallons per day. With, as we addressed earlier, a drip system irrigation, so there'll be little to no runoff, 5 to 10% into a stone bed. So there'll be no contamination of our immediate property, nor any migration.
Yeah, no, my question is, how much water are you going to use? In other words, from your growing season, your total estimated water usage that you're going to have. That will give me a better idea to see how many houses can be supplied with that amount of water, and how much water they're going to be pulling out of the ground that is going to dry everybody else's wells.
Based on the estimates for water use, it's 300 to 500,000 gallons per year. And that depends on the number of days that we operate. I know there was discussion. I think I put in the application a couple hundred days, and if you do the math out, maybe it's 180. But the point was trying to come up with a conservative value, and that's the number. As far as creating a situation where people's wells run dry, the state has a process under the Water Management Act, which is basically water rights. It's not something we talk about very often in Massachusetts if you're a homeowner, because there's plenty of water. In Massachusetts, you have to use a significant amount of water, like 100,000 gallons a day, to trigger a Water Management Act permit. So we're nowhere near the threshold, using 15,000 gallons on the worst day of being in a situation where we would impact neighboring wells.
Yeah, I went back in history, when you were trying to get into the Housatonic area. I believe it was Jared that said that there will be up to about 1 million gallons of water per growing season. That was quoted.
That's
there.
right. We switched to the drip irrigation system, and that is a reduction of about 60% conservatively the amount of water used, which puts you right smack dab in the middle of the 300,000 to 500,000 gallon estimate I just gave you. 60% off of 1 million gallons is 400,000. So it's just what I said. We agree. It's just we're using a different process.
Okay, thank you.
thank you. John, do we have another question on Zoom?
Yes, we have Salinarella. Please unmute your mic.
Okay, please identify yourself for the record.
Hi, my name is Selena Rella. I am one of the owners of Lot 4 on Townhill Road. My question is, should there be an issue with noise, smell, concern for crime, anything that, could happen? I appreciate that all of these seem thought out and well presented, which has been illuminating. But what would be the process for handling any of these issues should they arise, and who would determine what time frame is appropriate? To say swiftly is vague.
A couple of things. Our site will be completely closed to any retail traffic. So there'll be nothing close to a dispensary type of traffic activity. All of our security systems are monitored by two completely separate monitoring companies. Any intrusion triggers calls to the local police. Each security company, for redundancy purposes, will trigger calls to the police within 60 or 90 seconds? 60 to 90 seconds.
Selena, this is Brian O'Rourke, the chair of the select board. It's in the HCA, and also the Cannabis Control Commission has strict regulations that Sama would have to adhere to. They're under, correct me if I'm wrong, a 30-day review every 30 days. And any complaints that had to do with either noise or smell would come directly to the town select board, and it would be brought up with the building inspector. And it's in the host community agreement that we have the right to inspect, and that it would be handled immediately. So it would be less than a 30-day turnaround period from the time of a complaint being logged to it being rectified. The crime obviously would, those complaints would go to the police department. So, and then as a backup, you have the Cannabis Control Commission. So if you're not satisfied with how it was handled, you can always file a complaint with them, and they're very strict. Okay.
Okay, so a month.
A month at the outmost, yes.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay. Any other questions from Zoom? Okay, then I'm going to come back onto the floor. So I've got, yes, I'm sorry. Joanne, I'll give you that one.
Thanks.
Please state your name, sir.
My name is John Riedemann. I'm a taxpayer, but not resident. And this is my wife, Madeline. The land that we pay taxes on is on Abbey Road. It's directly across from the Sama proposed facility. In the bylaw that exists right now about special permits, there's a line that a special permit can be, must be deemed not offensive or detrimental to the neighborhood. So I guess my question is, first I'll say, I of course find this very offensive and very detrimental to my part of the neighborhood. Sama has, they've put this facility right on Abbey Road. It will be a long stretch of industrial greenhouses and manufacturing, processing. And so the land that I have right across from Abbey Road, I think, is going to be detrimentally affected. So I guess my question is just to the select board, is this a question that when you're considering the approval or denial of this special permit, is this actually something that you will take seriously, the offensive or detriment to the neighborhood? Thanks.
Thank you. I can assure you that we take all comments into consideration. You know, your input is valuable. We are concerned about every citizen in this town, and I've reminded folks in the past, you know, even the select board members live in this town. I know sometimes that's a shock to people. And two of the select board members actually live, I would say, less than a mile from this proposed facility as the crow flies. So everybody's opinion is important, and we will take everybody's opinion under advisement in making this decision. It's not one that will be made quickly or without a lot of consideration, trust me. So thank you for your time.
Brian, we have two more on Zoom as well.
Okay, we're gonna have to circle back to them. So I'll start up front here, and then I'll move back to Carl and then back over to Alex. So I think that's Ed under the mask, isn't it? Okay.
This is on? Okay.
Please state your name for the record, Ed.
Ed Brosman, 32 West Hubbard Road. Have sort of make some clarifications on some of the things that you said about the odor mitigation. This is a huge project, and it sounds like that you have not done anything like this, exactly like this project with greenhouses in Massachusetts. And then my other question would be, you said you've been in the business for 8 years. Can you give us a list of places that you have your system in place that we can contact and find out what the results are? Because once this is built, it's kind of late then to find out that it doesn't work. So what kind of, how can you give us some sense that this really is going to do what you say it is? And can we talk to people who are using it now? And would Sama agree to provide the town with an independent consultant to go out and talk to some of these people and see if what that information, how that fits with what you're telling us, and is it the same?
Okay, so first question, as far as similarity between this facility and others that we have done. Sorry, let me stand up. The facilities that we've done previously actually have a much higher concentration of growth than what we're currently looking at for the Sama facility, which is why we selected the devices that we did in our assessment of what they're proposing. You know, as mentioned with the case study that I had presented on earlier, we had to use a much more robust system for that particular facility just because of the density of product that they were actually producing. There's a secondary factor to this in that the Sama facility is going to be naturally ventilated through their, you know, it's an open air insert or open air supply. The facility that we treated in, it was Canada, they had basically a 50% recirc level, so the concentrations within that space were actually higher and you know, more difficult to work against. So we're very confident in the system's performance. As far as client outreach, I would need to go back to them and request whether or not they're willing to disclose that information. We you know, keep our client list fairly you know, tight, and just for their own, you know, their own interests, we don't offer that up, generally speaking. But in the industry, there's a lot of sharing that goes on, as has been mentioned several times here. So we could probably get some information back to you on that. There shouldn't be a problem with it.
You can understand why we're asking, right?
Oh, of course, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And sorry, just one other thing. You know, I will say this much: as far as you know, the composition of the odor producing products in the cannabis industry for our technology, they're actually relatively easy to address in comparison to some of the more complex chemical structures that we deal with. We have dealt, you know, as I said, in automotive manufacturing, where there was, you know, a heavy VOC load coming from, you know, some of their product, from their processes. And, after putting the system in, all of that was completely eliminated. There was no more reported issues, both either from the community or the employees at the plant. And then beyond that, one of actually the more difficult things, I'm sure everyone can appreciate it, tobacco smoke is loaded with a lot of very complex chemicals. We do a very, very good job of cleaning up the odors and subsequent haze that's associated with tobacco smoke, and are used in a number of casinos for that application. So, for the purposes of eliminating odors from cannabis, we have a very high level of confidence in our system's ability to mitigate those odors.
One other thing, Ed, our working agreement with Steve's company is on a guaranteed basis. So we're not expecting to dial it in perfectly on day one. Not to say that we won't be doing every effort to try and do that, but our working agreement is such that if there's a day or some time where it's not working, we address it right away. If you have a problem, you call us or call the town, whatever it is. They send somebody out quickly, and we keep dialing it in until it's eliminated.
I can appreciate that, but what I'm asking though is that by the time we get to that point, if it doesn't work, we've got this 100,000 square foot industrial facility there, and we have all sorts of problems with it. I would think if it's as easy as you say it is to deal with cannabis smell, that you should be able to easily tell us, here's 5 places that we've been in business with. We've been doing it for X amount of years. It's just like greenhouses that you're proposing here. And you can give us the names to do that. And my second part of the question was, if we get this information from you folks, are you willing to provide us with an independent consultant to verify that? It's not that I don't trust you, but it's one of these things that I think when you're looking at this situation, you want to know ahead of time. So is that a yes, you would?
To your first question, the effectiveness can be demonstrated, and there's lots of scientific papers on it. The industry, the cannabis industry in a legal basis is still in its nascent stages. And as Steve said, there, in our experience, are not a lot of clients that want to announce and expose themselves to how can I say, be under the microscope and announcing themselves. So,
well, but if you're getting good results, you'd want to do that, wouldn't you?
I agree with you, frankly. But having tried to do this, call around the country to people who are, they'll talk off the record, but they don't. They just refuse to go on the record for whatever, insurance reasons or whatever. Who knows? I mean, this is a young industry. It is recently legalized in the state of Massachusetts, and comparison to lots of other industries, it's still a very young industry that used to be very, very illegal. So people just, for right or wrong, logical or otherwise, they don't want to go on the record for it.
So I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think what you're both are saying is that at this point, we're not really going to know what the results that we get until it's built.
Well, we're not saying, well, two things. We're not saying he won't have any clients. He showed a case study of a 200,000 square foot project and the conditions where it was eliminated. And the other industries that have far more complex VOX and other odors, they have proved highly effective. So maybe those industries could be disclosed. Again, it's hard.
That case study, if I understood you right, was in a enclosed industrial building, not plastic greenhouses.
So it was again 50% recirculation. So 50% fresh air, 50% recirculated. So basically, you have a 50% discharge at any given time, with the rest of the air being recycled. And that was to help maintain humidity levels because of the positioning, right? The location of that was again in Canada, in a specific part of the country where during certain times of the year the humidity levels were detrimental to production. So they had to recirculate their air in order to maintain proper grow conditions for their product. You know, as I say, you know, we do have testimonials without client information there. I'm not going to say no. I can certainly look into what our clients are willing to share, but it is subject to their discretion. I can't speak for them.
I understand that. Just one.
My brother wanted to say something.
Yeah.
Can you unmute your mic, Bill?
Can you all hear me?
Yes, Bill.
Good. I think one of the issues that Steve mentioned a little bit earlier is that the complex of chemicals that PureCo has had to deal with are vastly more complex and more difficult to deal with than the cannabis odor. And so we can provide, or PureCo can provide information from an array of sources that demonstrate their efficacy. And I would like you to consider that information, because what is essentially happening is PureCo is dealing through hydroxyls with a chemical compound. And therefore, one could say that if you're dealing with a more complex compound, then the simpler one will be even easier to deal with. And I will just propose that thought as we address this issue further. Thank you.
All right. Well, for the purposes of right now, I don't want to belay this any more than I have, but let's just wait until we see what you provide us going forward, and then we can go from there. Is that fair? Okay.
You have 22 seconds left, Ed, and I see your wife is raising her hand. So, being a happily married man, I would suggest you hand her the mic.
I'm certainly going to give her the microphone.
I think the question for most of us here, at least from what I'm thinking, is that right now we have no smells. We just have the beautiful smell of nature surrounding us. And that's all we've ever had living here. And I think you're talking about all these other complex chemicals and so forth that this is supposed to take care of. And the example that you gave was an enclosed place. That's not here. We also are very windy here. I don't know if you've ever spent any time up on the mountain. Most of us here have. It's very windy, and that smell is going to go all over the place. And it's a quite repulsive smell. I've smelled it in many places, and it is a question. It's not good enough to say, okay, my question is, it's not good enough for you to say that you can't get information. What are people hiding? That's my question. What are they hiding that they can't have testimonials and give all kinds of information about how wonderful this product is?
Thank you. Go ahead, Steve.
Sorry, I would not say that any of these organizations are trying to cover up anything or try to, prevent information from coming out. As I said, we do have testimonials, but as far as client confidentiality is concerned, at this point in time, I would have to request that information be shared. We do have, again, off the top of my head, I would have to go back and look at what the testimonials are in order to, discern if some of these clients are open to sharing this information. But, we do have the testimonials in hand, and I can provide those. And to your point about the natural environment, the goal is to fully treat the odor within the greenhouses before any of the air makes it out. So there wouldn't be any associated problems with the exterior environment. And that is our goal, is to treat the space to the point where it is non-detectable outside of the space.
Thank you, Steve. So again, thank you, Roger, for bringing that up. Please, let's keep this to questions, and we will go to commentary in a few minutes. So I believe, Carl, you had a question, or this gentleman?
Yeah, hi.
Dominic? Okay.
Hi, Dominic Constam Jr. I live on Sears Road. I am a resident voter. And the other thing, what was the other thing? Can't remember. Taxpayer, thank you. So my question, I actually have three questions, but I'll try and do two. This is to the select board. How many permits are we talking about? I know this is a special permit. I have some land, my family has some land. I could probably build 20 of these, 30 of these. How many, if I came to you with a very similar permit, how many would get approved?
It would be on a case-by-case basis, Dominic, depending on, the validity of the permit, the application, the information provided. Right now, there is no restrictions at all in town. That's the purpose of the bylaw draft that has been written and will be presented at the annual town meeting. In that current state, there is a total canopy of 300,000 square feet. So there isn't a bylaw that proposes a limit on the amount of permits. It's on the total canopy square footage. And again, that's up for vote on May 17th at the annual, or May 15th at the annual town meeting. So I can't answer that.
Okay. And then another question more for Sama. I think this town, most of the townspeople see you guys kind of as a saving grace for what would be a desperate town with very low tax revenues. We don't have a lot of infrastructure. But I really want some clarity on the actual impact, economic impact you guys will have beyond just the donations that expire after 5 years. I have a business and we make revenues and I pay no tax on those revenues. So I know there's some talk of 3% gross going to the town. How long will that be in effect? And to clarify, I know you said you're doing $4,000 a pound, but from my understanding, you're actually doing oil extraction, not actually selling the cannabis by the pound.
So that I understand, how large is our community impact fee? A dollar amount?
Yeah, just can you give us some sense? There's a lot of discussion from the townspeople. I think the reason you've gotten, honestly, this is a special situation, a very special situation. I think the reason you've gotten this far is because a lot of people see this as an amazing opportunity for Sandisfield. So many times greater than maybe building another 10 houses or something similar. So can you give us an estimate and try to be conservative but realistic of what kind of dollar amount are we seeing every year from various taxes and revenues?
Well,
John, just before you answer that, I just want to address one thing with Dominic. So the HCA, have you read the HCA that's posted on the town website?
I've read some of it.
Okay, so basically for the first 5 million in revenue, gross revenue, it's a 3% impact fee. Then from 5 million and 1 to 10 million, it's 2%. And then anything after 10 million, it's 1.5%. The HCA does expire in 5 years. However, then it has to be renewed or a new one has to be written. So they cannot exist without an HCA in place. So in other words, as long as, in this case, it pertains to Sama is in business, there's an HCA in place. So it doesn't expire after 5 years and then just go away.
And so what happens if we can't come to an agreement after 5 years?
Then they lose their special permit and they're no longer in business.
Okay.
And I think the other, if I'm listening to you, you wanted to understand the total value of our business contribution. the way we see it is we're not a user of services. There'll be de minimis demand on any of the typical services, less, as Jim said, less than a single family home in many cases. But more critically, I think, as you were trying to compare it to single family houses, just on our lot alone, you could create 4 or 5 houses. We'll have no school services. We're not user of services, and these are just straight operating account contributions.
Thank you.
Okay. Carl?
Okay, Carl Nett, Town Hill Road. This is questions, not commentary, correct, Brian? Okay, my first question's for Selectman Riley. George, you kept referring to the draft bylaws, and the voters haven't spoken on those bylaws, okay? And, you can't assume those are going to pass. In fact, I would bet a lot of money they're not going to pass. And I was a little troubled by you referring to those and implying that your decision here tonight depends somewhat on how this project lines up with those bylaws. Could you clarify your position on that for me, please?
Yes, I said in my introduction that even though these bylaws have not been approved by town meeting, I believe that these bylaws do represent some of the best thinking of this town on this issue of cannabis cultivation and cannabis establishments. And therefore, I felt it was legitimate to refer to some of the aspects in those bylaws simply because they have been worked out very carefully with a number of individuals, with the input from quite a large number of individuals. And I felt that they do represent, at least to some degree, the considered view of the town of Sandisfield in regard to this issue, and I felt it was legitimate to refer to them in that context.
Okay, you said you believe and you feel. It's up to the voters to decide that, George.
That's
Okay?
correct.
The voters will decide whether there was good thinking behind these bylaws
I'm
or
not talking about whether the bylaw will be approved or not in its entirety.
Okay.
I'm simply saying that there are aspects of these bylaws that represent careful thinking. And therefore, it was appropriate for me to cite aspects of those bylaws in my questions to Sama.
Okay, and again, the voters will decide whether there's been careful thinking behind the bylaws or not. Second thing is for Sama. I appreciate and respect the fact that you're in a very competitive industry, and you're not going to reveal like your business plans because that reveals competitive strategy as to how you're going to beat other people. I can also understand why, if somebody's having good results in a cannabis farm with a certain technology, they might not be altogether too inclined to want to share that with other people that they're competing with in the industry for space, land, and so on and so forth. So I'm sensitive to those things. But I'm wondering why you're dancing around the issue of the financial impact to Sandisfield as you are. It's no mystery that industry norm for yield is about 1/10 of a pound per square foot. Okay. And yes, there's much higher than that. There's lower than that, but that's kind of like an industry average. And I would be surprised if Jared is going to be very proud of coming in below that. Okay. In fact, I'm betting he's going to come in higher than that. So if we do the math here on 100,000 square foot, that's 10,000 pounds a year in a single harvest. At $4,000 a pound, that's $40 million of revenue. The impact free, as Brian just explained, is not a flat 3%. It's 3% on the first 5 million, 2% on the next, and then 1.5. That comes out to $700,000 for Sandisfield just on the impact fee alone. So I understand you're in a very competitive industry, and I understand that things will vary. It'll take you time to ramp up. There's variables and stuff like that. But would you at least verify that there is potential for that kind of revenue?
Well, to be blunt, Carl, from your mouth to God's ears, that we go to $40 million, and we'd be happy to pay $700,000 a year to the town. And our business MO is conservative. Our internal modeling is not to dream about 4,000 a pound in perpetuity, et cetera, et cetera.
I understand that it's good business
We don't want
practice.
to create the expectations where 3 years from now, people say, well, you said.
I'm not asking you to create expectations, and I understand it's good business practice to underpromise and overdeliver. But
Yeah.
would you at least concede that the number I just cited is not impractical? It's a possibility.
Jared, Dave, you have the grow experience. Can you log in and talk about yield per acre? Or I mean,
No, square foot is what, yeah.
Per square foot?
I'm thinking around 1/10 of a pound per square foot.
Yeah. I mean, I'd be happy to interject. I mean, it's all subject to strain. I mean, but if you want to throw theoretical numbers around for closure, I mean, a typical greenhouse, you know, that size, 30 by 150 square feet, that's the numbers you're referring to are probably more so indoor numbers. But with greenhouses, you look at more about, you know, pound per square foot. So that size structure theoretically could generate close to a couple hundred pounds of flower and then produce some biomass. Even if you ran with that 200 number, say we had 23 greenhouses, that'd be 4,600 pounds. That times 4,000 is $18.4 million. And that's not including any byproducts. And this is just for the sake of just giving you some numbers.
Yep, I understand. And I've talked to people that are growing in Massachusetts in greenhouses that are exceeding the 1/10 of a pound per square foot.
Yeah, and I have experience out there. I've sold greenhouses up in Maine. I mean, we've done all this, and that's why we're just practical with our numbers, because it can vary year to year, and it's not that we don't want to disclose information. I mean, we have open books once we're in cultivation, and the entire town's going to know what we produce because they're going to get tax revenue for it. I mean, the disclosure of finances is only just to not, you know, just say something we're not going to achieve. It's not to set false expectations, just as John said. It's not to hide anything from the public.
I understand. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Joanne, Alex was waiting patiently. He's got a couple questions.
I just had a question about what you would see from the road once you, like, starting from the driveway. When you start looking left as you're driving by on Abbey Road, what do you see?
You see on page 9? Must be on page 8. I don't have a good picture of it. Greenhouse. The greenhouses are.
You mentioned tiering.
Oh,
right?
the site, yeah. As you drive up, well, Abbey Road is pretty narrow, so there'll be an improvement of Abbey Road post construction. We're going to coordinate that work with the town. It's on town property, so we'll collaborate and participate in that improvement. But if you're at the site driveway, you look up. It's about an 8% grade. An 8% grade is like a wheelchair ramp up. And then you'll come to a 4% or half of that parking area. So you're going to have a ramp up. You're going to see that's just like a wheelchair ramp, and then you're going to have a flat parking area.
Keep going past. There's a
You
retaining
go past.
wall.
Yeah, there's a 5-foot retaining wall.
Well, what's the elevation of Abbey Road there, and what's the elevation of the tier?
The elevation of the tier is 1720. And elevation of the road is 1710, 1708.
So you're 10 feet above the road?
You'll be 10 feet above the road.
Okay. And how far from the road is that?
The corner of the retaining wall is 12 feet.
And then there's a fence on top of that wall?
There's a 6-foot fence. That's from the property line. The road's another 20 feet away.
Okay.
So, the traveled way, if you're in your car, you're on the road. I'm on the property line. The property line's away from the actual edge of road. But yeah.
Okay. And in terms of the dry retention ponds that you see there, is there anything we can compare that to that we may have seen before?
Well, there's a detention pond like that at every shopping center you've ever been to.
So a shopping center.
The worst one I can think of to give you the most extreme example would be like Home Depot.
Okay, so this looks like a shopping center with
It doesn't look like a
walls and fences.
I told you if I'm trying to give you the most conservative example, it's a pond. It's a hole in the ground. It'll have trees around it.
Okay.
That's not a shopping center.
Well, that's if you've only seen it there.
Now I have one in front of my office that you can see that's beautiful. It's a pond, but I didn't want to give you the best example. I'm trying to give you if you're going to be critical, I was trying to give you the worst example.
I'm looking for my neighbors here and the detriment of their neighborhood. So what I'm trying to understand is what are the impacts to them in their neighborhood, and especially the things that are right on Abbey Road, which is a public road, and that will be forever. Like this is not just temporary, this is forever. So I'm trying to understand what those changes that they will see, because that is really the big impact.
So there's pictures in the application of what the building will look like. And there's, the buildings are 16 feet tall. And I represented that the 5,000 square foot building is similar to this building. That's what it will look like.
And then there's, I think I heard 7 trees along the edge.
I did trees. Yeah, the way we do street trees in subdivisions is just space them far apart. If you don't like that idea or you want something different, I'm sure the applicant is amenable. But we typically plant the trees so that they'll survive, and smaller trees have a much higher success rate than trying to plant large ones. And in 5 years, you'll be much happier that you planted the smaller ones. I can promise you that. And then I plant them up far apart so that when they do grow, they grow and they look good.
Okay.
But that's,
So
it's
I
very
guess
subjective.
This is a question for the select board. Is this, I noticed voting on this was on the plans for tonight. Is that in the works? Because I think there would need to be conditions. How does that process work?
So we have to put voting on it, because if it does come to a vote and it's not on the agenda, we can't vote.
Sure.
But it doesn't mean that we have to vote tonight. So,
thank you.
Yep. Okay. Yes, ma'am. Please identify yourself for the record. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Madeline Falk, and like my husband said, we are your closest neighbor. And thank you, Alan, for asking those questions about what we'll see on Abbey Road, because my question is to the security person. When we drive down Abbey Road or walk our dogs, whatever, down Abbey Road, it's just so beautiful and serene right now. And a lot of other people enjoy Abbey Road, and we've seen people walk up and down Abbey Road. When we drive or walk down Abbey Road, are we going to be on camera? At any point? Are the cameras going to be facing Abbey Road? And are we going to be lighting up the lights as we drive down Abbey Road?
No, the lighting and the security systems will only be from the border fence in.
So nothing faces Abbey Road. Like, so if we come and go, there's nothing on camera of us going up and down Abbey Road?
Correct.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And then my other question is regarding services. You said that you're going to be not using any services. And if security is breached, you said earlier that that Sandisfield Police will be coming to your facility to check things out. So that is actually using services. And if it is breached, do alarms go off? Do sirens go off? Do lights go off? What happens if the place is breached?
If the fence is breached, the perimeter lights go on in the zone area where the fence was breached. At that point, the alarm system would communicate to a central station, who would then dispatch the police and notify Sama people that the alarm has been activated.
So it's a silent alarm?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
It's not required to be audible.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sean, do we have folks on Zoom with questions? I just want to.
Yeah, we've got about 6 in line.
Okay, so let's take 2 from Zoom and then 2 from the audience, okay?
Okay, up next we have Lori Cantor. Please unmute your mic.
Lori, please identify yourself for the record.
Hi, this is Lori Cantor. Thank you for calling on me. Stephen Kahn's been trying. He can't get his hand up, and I would like to give my time to him to ask a question. Can you do Big Cup and speak with him, please?
What was his name again, Lori?
Steve Kahn.
It's Steve Kahn, but it's under Big Cup on Zoom, it seems.
I got it.
You found him?
Okay.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Go ahead and unmute your mic.
Thank you.
Hello, thank you very much for allowing me to speak. My name is Steve Kahn. I live on Stump Road. I have lived in Sandisfield for 40 years. I am a voting resident. So I hope we're all familiar with the expression, we the people. We the people. It just seems to me that this whole thing is very rushed, and I don't know why. I was at the first meeting in the tent at 17 degrees with the wind blowing. I think you three gentlemen, who you have my utmost respect, are going to make your vote, and you're going to vote this in. Why not wait for the town meeting? Why not? I would love that. I respect Sama, and I hope they make a lot of money. I would love to see a 5-year business plan detailed. I don't care how much. I hope they make money. But I believe there should be a minimum guarantee for the town. Forget percentages. That's all great. There should be a minimum guarantee for the town. This is a very big change for the town of Sandisfield. And I truly believe it should be left to we, the people, and wait for the town meeting and not have your vote tonight. You represent all of us. And if the vote goes your way, great. That's okay. I respect that. But I do not believe you three gentlemen should be making this decision by yourselves this evening. I know you were voted in and you have the authority to do it, but you represent the people. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Steve. Don, do we have a question from the Zoom audience, please?
Next up, we have Hope McNeil. Hope, please unmute your mic.
Hope, please identify yourself for the record.
Of 102 Town Hill Road. Thomas Sirico.
Thank you.
And I have a question that I haven't heard anyone ask. When is this company going to do a pump test of the property? Not a perk test like a home gets, but a factory. I was told by people in the business that you have to have a pump test, and they draw water for 3 days so that they can find that if the water pulls up enough water, that minerals and things on the bottom will now be in the rest of the water aquifer that everyone else uses.
We're going to Jim Scalise from SK Designs answer that.
So the requirement for a 3-day, 72-hour pump test is for a public water supply. And those are required for a well that's used by more than 15 people, more than 180 days a year. So this won't qualify as a public water supply well, so a pump test is not required. This will be a private well. It'll be governed by the Board of Health. So we won't need to do a step drawdown or a extended pump test. It's not required.
No perk test either?
A perk test is absolutely required for a septic system.
But the size of your operation would seem it would deem necessary to do a pump test.
No, it's based on on a population, and we don't meet that criteria. We don't meet the criteria. It's not as, there's a lot of buildings, but there's not a lot of people. I mean, there needs to be more people than we're proposing on a regular basis.
But there's a lot of water being used.
That is, that's not relevant as it relates to the regulations under water supply.
But it is to me being on border, right at the end of your road.
I appreciate that, and to qualify, to cross a threshold for the concerns that you're raising is significantly higher than the amount of water that we'll use. So we're not even close. That's under the Water Management Act. I know I quoted in the application. I don't know it by heart, but we don't come anywhere close to the threshold under that.
Well, that's the only question I have.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to take a question from the audience now. Okay.
Hi, I'm Jay Allison Mascarello, and I am a taxpayer and a new resident as of a year ago. New Hartford Road. So I don't know how this is going to go because I'm new here. And hello, everybody. But in the event that it does go, is your company willing to put aside at least 1% for the community to be able to beautify the area that you're going to have this building in? It's a common practice with a lot of organizations. And I think because of what the impact could be on this community, you might want to consider that kind of approach. So that's my request, is that you would consider putting aside at least 1% of whatever your building costs are to be used for a community arts project to beautify that area in some way that's appropriate to the area. So that's a question, and I'd love an answer.
Are you asking for an additional 1% in addition to
Absolutely.
the 3%?
Absolutely. Absolutely. 1% of construction fee.
That's a lot less than the.
It's way less than profits. And it's something that a lot of organizations do.
You have 3% per year of a community impact fee.
We're talking about construction costs, and we're talking about something that would impact in a positive way the area. It's called 1% for art, and it's a national program. And a community like this, who has never undergone this type of construction, at least deserves that kind of positive impact. Because I don't know how it's going to go, but I'm just asking for your commitment to do something like that.
Candidly, I don't have a response for that at this time.
Will you be willing to look into that?
We're designing trees and, trying to maintain the existing natural conditions as best as we can. Minimal earth moving, environmental sensitivity, responsible agriculture, et cetera, et cetera. So it's an enormous subjective, art to you and art to me and art to our neighbors.
Well, the nice thing about that is the nice thing about the 1% for art program, it does get put out to the community, and the community has a lot of input on it. You're just providing the funding for it to happen. The community does the rest.
And that's 3% per year of our gross revenue, which could be as high as
this isn't a per year thing. This is a one-time 1%.
Jane, he's answered the question as best as he can. I'm sorry, Steve. I had a gentleman in the back with his hand up first, and then I'll come. Okay, and I'll come back to you after. Thank you, sir. Please state your name for the record.
My name is Douglas Segrin. I live on Sandisfield Road. I've been listening to this about Abbey Road all night here. Where exactly is Abbey Road?
So Abbey Road is up Town Hill Road on the left-hand side, almost to the peak, I would say. It used to run all the way through and come out at the end of West Street. It no longer does because the beavers have made that impossible. It hasn't been maintained by the town in probably, Steve, 20 years, 15, since you were there? So at least 10 years ago.
Did it always go by Abbey Road?
It used to be called Hubbard at one point, but that's a long, long time ago.
Not that long ago. Why the change?
I have no idea.
Who changed it?
I have no idea.
Who owns it?
The town owns it.
As Abbey Road or Hubbard Road?
As Abbey Road. It's on our maps as Abbey Road.
Is it in the registry of deeds as Abbey Road?
I couldn't answer that tonight. Yes, it's on the survey.
AKA? That's also known as. That's not Hubbard Road. You do what you want with it, but it's not Abbey Road. It's Hubbard Road. East Hubbard Road.
Okay, sure.
Back for a minute. I'm sorry, I don't remember your name.
So Doug, this was quite a while ago. It
Okay,
was
Ms. Mascarello.
closed.
If
They
you read,
closed that portion of West Hubbard Road. And then there were folks that bought land down there that were going to build a house. So at that time, it came back to the town to be voted to be reopened. So we reopened it as Abbey Road, and then that family decided not to build there. That goes back about 40 years. So it's registered as Abbey Road. It's an open road called Abbey Road. Yes, it is. It's a public way. It's a town road. And I believe that Sama is going to pave from Town Hill to their driveway going into their facility. Am I correct? But it's an open road.
We are obligated as the town to bring it up to Chapter 90 specifications. We were very frank with Sama that we have 5 seasons in Sandisfield, one of them being mud season, and that to be 1,100 feet down Abbey Road and be able to use it during mud season, they'd probably want to upgrade it to something more of a chip seal type road, so they're aware of that. Any improvements beyond the gravel road requirements that the town has under Chapter 90, then Sama would take over from that point. So,
if Ms. Mascarella, I recommend that you read our host community agreement. In addition to the community impact fee, we've agreed to contribute $15,000 per year as long as the host community agreement is in effect for library and other services than that. Okay.
And it's usually built into a project, and it's just something else that we do that positively impacts, because what I'm hearing is a lot of what people are saying, and I would agree. I mean, if I had my brothers, I'd probably say choose another town, and no offense, because I think you're probably all great guys. But, that's just my own opinion. But since you're going to be here, it would be really lovely to have something that's something that would be durable and positively impacting the area. That's what I'm saying. Nothing about the library. I read it.
thank you, Jane. So we're going to move forward. I am going to move into a 20 minutes of commentary as a beginning. Excuse me? Yeah, I will take your question, please.
Okay, hi. My name's Cindy True. I live at 103 Town Hill Road.
I'm happen to be raising my family at 103 Town Hill Road. I resent the notion that there are no neighbors, or that there are very few neighbors. I happen to be a neighbor whose property line runs about just under 1,200 feet down Abbey Road from Town Hill Road. My first question is, we have 23 greenhouses here in a 5,000 square foot facility, about the size of this building. Are the greenhouses going to be on concrete slabs? Or are they going to be on a concrete footing surrounding a gravel? What is the footing for the greenhouses?
There's no concrete slab planned.
What is anchoring the greenhouses to the ground, please?
Poles anchor the structure, and gravel is the surface under the plants.
Okay, so that's 100,000 square feet of, let me start that over again. And what is underneath the 5,000 square foot facility? Is that concrete, a concrete slab similar to this?
Yes.
Okay. How many cubic feet of gravel is that underneath the greenhouses, roughly?
100,000 square feet.
100 that cubic feet.
Oh, cubic feet. We haven't determined how deep the.
Okay, thank you. And my next question is regarding the greenhouses themselves. These are piped greenhouses with a plastic cover. Is that correct? And the materials for those would be brought in via truck, I imagine, right? Gravel will be brought in via truck. Over what time period do you expect the process of construction to take place? Months, weeks? 9 to 12 months. And what do you plan on doing to mitigate the noise and traffic for the sake of residents with young children who like to play in the yard and play in their woods? What is your plan to, sort of respect the neighborhood as you are bringing all these trucks in and out?
There is no plan.
Well, I'm not going to sugarcoat.
I'm not going to sugarcoat a construction process. There's a process where there'll be traffic. There's a process at times there'll be noise. We can talk about hours of operation. That's something that we talk about. There's a sequence of construction that can occur, but it's a town road and they plan to use it as such. So the idea that there's some mitigation for a town road, there isn't. There just isn't one.
And so I would expect that there would be continuous maintenance required on that road as well to allow it to be passable for multiple large dump trucks and tractor trailers carrying materials.
The heavy construction process won't last the entire time. So it's not like you'll have 12 months of solid truck traffic, because that's not true. You'll have a much shorter period, probably 2 to 3 months, where there'll be earthwork, and that'll be where there'll be the most intense truck traffic. After that, it will be more delivery trucks, which will be much less frequent and spread out. But there's construction impacts, no doubt.
Thank you. I have one more operational question, and that's in regard to noise mostly. There was some question earlier about fans and generators, and I'm just wondering if and part of an answer that related to the growing process and allowing a dark cycle in the growing process. What happens at sundown? So does this place go quiet at night? My house is less than 1,200 square feet, and again, I'm raising my young family here, and so I'm just wondering about what the noise impacts would be. I'd also like to mention that the rear portion of my property is wooded currently, and that I'm already sort of reconsidering some plans that I might have on my property, because if I take any trees down, that's certainly going to increase the noise that reaches my house. So if you could just sort of speak to that.
The plans now are to end business around 8 p.m. So there'll be no traffic in the evenings. We're certainly not a 24/7 operation. And the vehicular traffic, once we're built and up and running, the vehicular traffic and the movement, as Jim says, will be equivalent to a single-family house. So we'll have maybe once a month, we're expecting a truck, maybe a tractor trailer sized truck to come in with materials. Other than that, it's just cars. When product is moved out, it'll be in a unmarked panel van. So the noise will be insignificant. No, it will be very little difference between a single family home up there and what we're doing once we're up and operational.
Okay, thank you. Is there Zoom questions, Sean? All right, we'll take 2 Zoom questions and then we're going to go into a commentary period for a few minutes.
Okay, next question is from Leslie Garwood. Please unmute your mic, Leslie.
Leslie?
Sure. I'm happy to let somebody else go. Mike Witkowski.
Yeah, to speak, please. Do we have someone else, Sean?
Didn't I just say?
Okay, next question would be from a user called iPhone. Please unmute your mic.
Please state your name for the record.
No response. We'll move on
Okay.
to Michael Witkowski. Please unmute your mic, Michael.
Sir, this is Jennifer Pilbin from 12 West Hubbard.
Yes.
I thought I was unmuted. Sorry about that. A couple of things, like 3 things I would like to talk about. Of course.
We're in a question session.
Yep, it's questions. Would it be possible that, there's been comments about, planting the straggly trees around the property? What about if they can put some kind of bushes that would go the height about an SUV, and that'll keep all the gawkers from looking out, and then that would also, make the road more smoother? That's something to consider. I'll just go through my questions, and they can answer them if they wish. I understand, of course, for the state of Connecticut, you have to put up a bond restoration for the property. The state of Massachusetts, I'm sorry, a bond restoration for the property. Who decides, the state or the town? And then my final thing is, we were talking a lot about the smell of marijuana and how, some people find it very offensive. Every single person in the state of Massachusetts can grow 6 plants singly by themselves in budding condition. And a family can grow 12 in budding. That means they can have others coming up. And for many, many years, even before Massachusetts became legal, there is a very high amount in Sandisfield of people growing and surrounding areas. And they've grown for years. So when people say that there's been quiet, they don't smell anything and everything's wonderful, they have no clue what's going around, their backyard in their corner. I mean, they're not smelling this stuff. So I don't think it's going to be a huge problem. And it's been going on here for years. And it'll probably continue going on for many, many, many years. If I can get a answer on the bushes and the bond restoration, I would appreciate it.
The commission, the state determines the bond required to remove any cannabis evidence there. And there have been, as far as we know, in all the years that the commission, that cannabis has been legal, there has only been one complaint logged in the state about odor. And that was, and Will, if you're still with us, maybe you could speak to that.
Will, if you're available, please unmute your mic.
Yes. So the question is about the complaints for smell, and I am only aware of that one complaint for smell. I'm not aware of any others, and I don't know whether that came from a small home grow or whether it came from a large facility. But to the extent that the Cannabis Control Commission has control of nuisances, that's generally left to the locality.
And let me, we didn't introduce Will Luzier in the beginning. Will is a consultant for us to help us navigate the complexities of the Cannabis Control Commission. He has been involved with the regulation creation from day one in the state of Massachusetts. He has Will, maybe you just give a quick bio on your background as to how, what
Sure.
your career is.
I'm a lawyer. I spent 12 years in the Attorney General's office. I spent 13 and a half years working for 2 state senators. And then for the last 6.5 years of my my tenure with the Commonwealth, I was the Executive Director of the Interagency Council on Substance Abuse and Prevention, working very closely with Lieutenant Governor Murray on a whole range of substance use issues. And after I left state service, I became the campaign manager for the campaign to regulate marijuana like alcohol. And that was a successful initiative legalizing marijuana in Massachusetts. And now I'm a consultant working with several clients, helping them navigate the licensing process.
Thank you, Will. So I am going to open this up for a few minutes of public comment, and then we are going to discuss moving forward from this point. Is there anyone on the floor that would like to make a comment that has not already spoken?
I mix up my comments with my questions, but
Please state your name for the record.
Elizabeth Flaherty,
Thank
Town
you.
Hill Road. I do have a question, and I think I missed it. Are you planning on paving the road on Abbey Road?
There's no plans formally in place. We are obligated as a town to bring the road up to Chapter 90
Okay.
standards. Sama is aware of the fact that we have a prolonged mud season here in town. And they've been made aware of that, and they know that to rectify that and improve their passage,
Yeah.
it would require chip sealing or something. So,
Okay,
you know,
I was
that's,
just thinking I horseback ride. Sorry.
so, okay, thank you. Kathy Burrows. Please state your name.
Kathy Burrows, New Hartford Road. Wow. I just wanted to make a statement to the select board to ask them to vote this in as a yes. Our town has a majority portion of state land and forested land with tax reduction. The greater portion of the tax burden is left to the small population of homeowners who live here. My great-grandfather came here in 1904, and my husband and I moved here permanently as full-time residents in 2004. We've seen 2 different solar farm projects proposed and rejected. Great loss of revenue to this town. Also a nursing home, the same thing, rejected. And you know where they moved? To the next town over. Next week, New York State is probably going to make cannabis legal. I see this project as a big win for Sandisfield, and I would hate to see it lost again. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Anyone else in the audience? Roger, thank you. Sorry, John, I didn't see your hand up.
Yeah, just a few comments. Roger Brown, I'm on West Street, so actually just on the other side of the state forest from this facility that's been proposed. So I would sort of echo what Kathy said about the opportunity here. I've seen too much commercial opportunity, and I see this as a commercial opportunity passed by the town, and we do not benefit from it. I also would suggest that we treat this commercial opportunity as that, and not something that we tell ghost stories about in terms of all the potential downfalls, and think about it as an opportunity that either you pass on it or see it as something that accretes to the town. I see this as a real positive for the town. I do believe that we've overstated a lot in terms of the damage to the town. This town is basically forests because people have given up fields, and that's exactly what this looks like. Abbey Road, if anyone's visited, is vacant. There are no buildings on Abbey Road. So the damage is prospectively to people who would like to perhaps maintain the look and feel, but they don't own the property. So you really need to back off and think about it from a town's perspective. And I think from the town, we would benefit by having this, and I do hope the select board passes this.
John Burrows, just again, I'm going to go to the folks we haven't heard from yet before I come back.
Good evening. John Burrows from 174 New Hartford Road. As a past member of the Finance Committee, and even to this day, I think that every year the same thing comes up. We're looking for new growth. We need new growth for our to increase our tax revenue base. Otherwise, a town has a hard time surviving. I just want to say that I'm in favor of the project.
Thank you, John. Barb?
Hi, Barbara Cormier, Norfolk Road. First of all, I'd like to thank the selectmen. I think you've done a wonderful job in making the best deal you could for the town. And I encourage you to go ahead with the vote and vote positive for this project. As you know, our town needs money desperately. And whether people want to agree with that or see it, we can't even sustain our school budget for much longer. So we've got to do something, and I think this is a good start. So thank you all.
Thank you, Barb. Carl, and then Dominic.
This will be quick. I encourage the select board to vote in favor of this project, and I'd also like to commend them on having done an outstanding job in negotiating the HCA. We've done a much better job negotiating HCAs than other towns, and you guys are to be commended for that. Last thing I have is there was a number of people who couldn't be here tonight because of scheduling conflicts, and they asked me to read their names off. They communicated me in writing their support of this project and asked that I would read their names off. That's Marie D'Amato, George Munson, Michelle and Roger Brown, but Roger's here now, Stephen Rinaldi, Andrew, Sandra, Anna, and Rosemary Snyder, all voting residents, Barbara and Bruce Colorio, Dawn Margraf, and Sarah Haraska.
Thank you. Dominic?
Sorry. So I want to say that I think, again, the revenues are obviously the most important thing for this whole conversation. So I have two things. One, the renegotiation of the 5 years, after the 5 years, would that be voted on and agreed by the Board of Selectmen, or would it be considered something that is put to bid, and maybe we could do a populist vote of whether or not those numbers seem satisfactory to renew?
That's a negotiation between the Board of Selectmen and the Sama, in this case, Sama. LLC.
Okay. And so I don't want to come off the wrong way. There's a sort of second, is there any benefit to kind of considering how that negotiation is done? I obviously trust you guys and everything, and I don't know about the future of Sandisfield or who will be on the board in the future, but if a company with potentially $40 million in revenue has only the 3 guys on the select board standing in the way of a renegotiation of a contract, potentially there could be some question of, who's talking to who and maybe what are the incentives there.
Well, I guess 2 things. I'll comment, and if the rest of the board would like to. I was designated by the board to be the one to do the negotiations. 5 years from now, I will not be on the select board. I don't know who will be. I would assume that they would probably follow a like practice, because you can't have all 3 in the negotiation, or else it would have to be done in an open meeting due to open meeting laws. Therefore, I guess the first thing I would say is nobody runs for the select board because they don't have the best interest of the town at hand. So you have to have faith that, we're not doing it for the money, trust me. Okay. So that's number 1. Number 2, we're kind of at an advantage, with all due respect to John and Sama, in that, we hold the cards, so to speak. So they're coming to us for a special permit. I don't want to say we would do anything unethical, because we wouldn't, but, Sama wants to be as good a neighbor as we want them to be, would be my way to describe that. And if the HCA that was in place for 5 years worked for both parties, I don't see why it wouldn't work again for another 5 years. Again, I don't have a crystal ball. I can't see into the future, but I would think whoever sits in the chair in the negotiations is going to have the best interest of the town at hand. So I don't know if you gentlemen would like to.
Just a brief comment. You bring up a point that is really important, and that is every voter in this town needs to look very carefully when the select board position comes up for election. Who are these people? Do they really have the best interest of the town in mind? It's not just a, trivial matter. The select board is entrusted with a huge amount of decision-making on behalf of the town. Most of that takes place totally invisibly. Nobody even knows 90% of what the select board does and spends its time on, but it's crucial for the well-being of this town. Here, you see the tip of the iceberg. And so then people are saying, oh my God, 3 people are going to decide? Well, these 3 people were elected by the voters of this town. And this is the way that people of the town consciously set this up. So there's going to be an election in the middle of May for a new select board position. And I please ask you all to be very conscious of who you want to occupy that position. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just want to say, I thank you guys so much for all the work you do. And that was nothing to say about you guys individually.
Wasn't
just
taken that way.
in 20 years, when maybe it looks different, I want to plan for the future. So thank you. My last thing is, I do think this is a great opportunity for Sandisfield. I would be inclined to vote yes for it. I do think that it's really important to limit the total impact that a series of these businesses could have in Sandisfield. We all love what Sandisfield is. It's natural. It's an amazing place. And I think while we can have maybe 1 or 2 of these facilities, anything more than that would be definitely a detriment. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'll take 2 more comments and then we're going to wrap. I'll do Alex and then I'll come back. Actually, I'll take 3 comments. I apologize.
Alex Bowman, New Harvard Road. I think they could have a great business here. I don't think it's the right place. I think of John and Madeline, who have nearly half a mile of frontage across the street. I think of Cindy and Dennis, who have 1,000 feet of frontage on Abbey Road. They're the neighborhood. Hank, the southern abutter. Our bylaw requires, unfortunately, our bylaw requires that the proposed use must not be detrimental to the existing or future character of the neighborhood. And these neighbors have made entirely reasonable claims that this proposal is detrimental to the character of the neighborhood. It's clear that granting this special permit permanently and irreversibly changes their neighborhood. It builds right on and into the setback and seems to consider Abbey Road as their own private driveway, contradicting their claim that the location of our property and buildings will be such that they won't be seen at all. That's just not true. State law requires that the proposal have industrial attributes that are completely out of character for anything in the vicinity. There will be a half mile of chain link fencing, including a football field length, right at the Abbey Road edge of the property. There's no long private driveway hiding it from view. This is not a private road. This is a town-maintained road. The enormous footprint requires drastic alteration to landscape the scale, which is unprecedented in Sandisfield for any private complex. They'll bulldoze flat tens of thousands of square feet of gently sloped land, at some point sticking 20 feet below grade. The erosion control plan shows a 150-foot long retaining wall, raising the northeast corner 10 feet above road level, right in setback, and the chain link fence on top of this. They're going to create enormous earthen berms and a massive drainage system, which flows north, right into the Abbey Road ditch. And we all know how good we are at maintaining water on dirt roads. Sorry, it's true. The bylaws do permit greenhouses, yes, by special permit, but just because the bylaws do allow a particular use does not mean that any special permit application is acceptable. To me, previously, this company has shown little respect for Sandisfield and the immediate abutters. They required people to travel to a community outreach meeting in the snow, which they then called in from afar. The only reason the project seems to be considered is because of the impact fee. And yes, it would be great, but we should not burden our neighbors because of this. Our selectmen have also publicly announced the impacts to the town would be minimal. So where does that leave us in 5 years when the HCA is up for a renegotiation when we have to do an impact fee? The special permit process should protect neighbors from exactly this type of development. I find the proposal to be entirely inappropriate for the location, but fitting for Sandisfield's industrial park, or even a place where the neighbors welcome it. The planning board and selectmen have already voted for bylaws that will not allow this. As it stands, I hope you will deny this special permit application.
Thank you. I'm going to go to John first, and then I'll go to you, Bill.
Thank you, John Riedemann. Thanks for that. So, as you might guess, I'm going to respectfully ask that you deny this permit. Again, if the language in the bylaws means anything about maintaining the character and reducing the harm to the neighborhood, this is devastating. Again and again, Sama has talked about the land across from their property as unoccupied, which it is. But Madeline and I have had this land for many years, and we adore this land. It's everything to us, and it literally is our life savings. And we haven't been able to afford to build a house on it yet, but we've dreamed about it for years. And now we're seeing that dream turn into a nightmare. How could we want to? It's going to go from a quiet, peaceful, serene country road to an industrial marijuana manufacturing facility. I am not against marijuana. I'm not against bringing money to the town. Of course, I want to see Sandisfield prosper. but not in this way. And I really hope that we can do the same thing with smaller facilities that are more appropriate for the town and will fit with the character of the town. And whatever happens, I do thank you guys for all your hard work. You've done a great job. Thank you.
Yeah, hold on one second.
John, I actually have a question for you. I walked up Abbey Road, and there's a fairly extensive logging operation going on. Is that on your property? It seems to be.
Yes.
Okay. That's a pretty, as I said, it's a pretty extensive logging operation. Large tracts of land cleared, piles of logs on both sides of the road, and many, many century-old trees cut down. And that's on your property.
Yes, George. This logging operation was what the forester called a conservation logging. This was logging operation that took into account the health of the forest in every account. I went with the logger every step of the way, and we took out trees that were diseased or broken. And the point was to make the forest healthier. We also cleared a couple spots, one of them right across from Sama, where we thought we might sell a plot of land that might help us pay for building a house further down the road.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bill?
Bill Taylor from New Hartford Road. I don't think I said that before. I've been inclined to think that we need to do smaller operations. I think the number set in the bylaws makes a lot of sense. And with all due respect for the Sama folks that I think want to make something really successful, and for the select board and many of you in this room that want to see revenue come in, I do think a nursing home or a solar farm might have been a good thing, and I'm not sure why we didn't approve them. They're more proven technology than this cannabis industry, which is new and fluctuating wildly. Solar panels have constantly gotten cheaper. I'm just not understanding why this is the only option this town has to make revenue. And I think acting out of desperation is not the way to go. And I think taking a more measured approach, looking at some smaller operations, and I think setting a cap that pretty much allows one, or maybe up to three of these large grows, rather than allowing locals to have smaller operations with more of a boutique product might be a better way to go that can get a higher price. Because once RJ Reynolds and Philip Morris get into this business, the price is going to drop here the way it did in Oregon. And the question I have is, can you make it on $1,000 or $500 a pound, whatever the equivalent is in the oils you're going to extract? What's going to happen down the road? What happens if the folks that are doing this, the business keeps getting sold to other people, as one editorial in the paper mentioned, happens sometimes with operations like this. So there are just a lot of concerns, and I think moving hastily doesn't make sense. And, I don't want to make enemies coming up with a position that may be not the majority opinion in this room. And, but I do think that that moving forward on this is not the right thing to do. I don't want to say I'm against it or that I'm against cannabis. It's certainly healing for a lot of people. It's also a drug, has its ups and downs, just like alcohol or anything else. I would just say, don't vote for it. Let's see where the bylaw goes in May, decide what this town wants, and not push something through that's going to divide the town.
Thank you for your time. Dolores?
I'd like to elaborate a little bit on what Kathy Burrows said. We've been here for 41 years. At one time, we had 7 restaurants. We had 2 general stores. We had a Rod and Gun Club. We had turkey shoots. We had block dances. We had square dances. We have very little. If it weren't for Lynn doing the bunny hop and the few things for the children, we don't even have a playground for our children. We have lost half of our business license revenue. I, as an employee of the town and residents, are begging you to pass this. We had Car Metal Products that employed 30 people. So we have nothing. We have a few cottage industries. We have, Chuck Nelson is, and the nursing home. But we've chased everything away. We had 2 general stores that wanted to come in, and people complained about the ambient lighting. They complained about the color of the gas pumps. We chased them away. We chased away the nursing home that wanted to go up on Route 57. We chased away solar power, wind power, cell towers. This has a potential to help our town. We can all complain that we have more taxes to pay. Where else is the revenue coming from? We need business. This, to me, is an innocuous business. They're growing plants. What difference does it make? Take the word hemp, marijuana, cannabis out of it. They could be growing tomatoes. They could be growing hops to grow beer, to create beer. They could be growing grapevines for wine. It's all on the same playing field. It's a plant. You have to get out of the stigma of it being cannabis and marijuana. It's a plant. And there's only money to be made here. And it's a short boom time because other states are going to be approving it. We have a little window of opportunity, and you might say, oh, it's only $500,000 this year. It's $500,000 more than we get. To me, it's a no-brainer. I implore you to pass this. Thank you.
Thank you. So at this point, I am going to close the meeting for public comment, and I'm going to ask the select board if they have any other further statements to make.
None for me.
Is the board comfortable with moving forward with a vote, and would someone like to make a motion, or is there more deliberation and research to be made?
In my initial questions, I have asked Sama for a number of documents. I myself do not feel ready to take a vote until I've seen those documents.
So then at this point, I would ask Jonathan, there's some more documentation that we want to get from Sama. So do we continue the public hearing based on that? Because it's my understanding that in order for us to take a vote, we all need to be in agreement to take a vote. Is that correct?
Well, a couple things. If there's more information you want to take in, you need to keep the public hearing open because you can only take in new information while the public hearing is open. The board could take a vote without unanimous agreement, but because you're a 3-member board, unanimous agreement is required to approve it. So I suspect that the applicant would prefer not to have a vote forced tonight if one of the members feels that he's not able to vote tonight.
So then I would make a motion to continue the public hearing until next Monday night, in which time we can get that other information that you had requested, George, and then we will move forward from there. Next Monday is, forgive me, April 5th, 6 p.m. Same place.
So do I need to repost this, Jonathan?
Sorry, Delissa, 1 second. You do not need to re-advertise as long as the board votes to continue to a time and place certain.
So I would make a motion that we continue until next Monday, April 5th at 6 p.m. Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor? Brian O'Rourke, aye.
George Riley, aye.
Mark Newman opposed.
All right. So we will continue until next Monday, April 5th. Okay. No, the public hearing comment.
Sorry. Just before you said anything, once new information comes in, it would be appropriate for the public to be able to comment on the new information. That would be an appropriate, it's up to the chair, but that, in my opinion, would be an appropriate policy.
Thank you. No, that's that's basically what I was going to say. So, all right. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.